Okay. Lot to do. I hope everybody bears with us. We have a few things we have to take care of. We'll start with the approval of the minutes from our meeting on January 4th, since we did not meet in February.
I just have a correction on page 7. And this week, the 725, the E, the county register of deeds. Probably just need to strike the E.
Say that again, Karen.
Oh, second
Yeah, 725.
Okay,
with E.
okay.
You want to tell us that again, please, ma'am? I didn't get there.
Oh, okay, where's on page 7,
Where it says
725 PM town
725.
planner.
Okay, yeah.
That first sentence, it says recorded with E.
Oh, okay.
It's just a county, it's just a typo.
Yeah, okay.
Got a clarification under 704, where it attributes the statement to myself. Second line, where I've heard a lot about this particular case. The word room should be rooftop.
Neil, what was that timestamp?
704?
704, meaning the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right above.
Okay, I'm making a note of it. I'll correct it.
Anything else? Anybody? Anything else? All right, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Have a second?
A second.
All in favor? Robert?
I've got it. Thank you.
Okay, the next thing is agenda item A. We need to elect a chair and a vice chair for the planning board for the new year. At this time, we're going to do the chair first. Do I have a nomination or any conversation or nomination for chair?
I'll make a motion or nominate Karen. If you'll consider it.
It's a lot.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Are you more senior than me? So
I'll accept.
Would anybody like to second the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, all right. The second part of our new business would be the election of vice chair. Do I have a nomination for vice?
I'll make a nomination for vice chair. I nominate Leanne for vice chair position for the planning board.
I would accept that nomination.
I'll second it.
Everybody in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Did you get all that, Robert?
Tony wrote it
No, where are you? I see you over there. How did you sneak back in?
down.
Now you switch.
Did we switch over?
Yeah. Usually,
I go here.
yeah, you'll go here. Susan, we'll put you down here.
Oh, I got the.
Oh, so there
I got
is the
first
order
prize.
to
Well, we typically, you do that with, so,
Do you need me to move?
no, you're
Okay.
fine. We'll put Susan down here.
Okay.
Sorry, Susan.
I'm actually that's first chair.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Down to the end of the table. The water.
Mhm.
Let me get my mess. I'm sorry.
So we're going to move on to agenda item B. It's okay with everyone. Agenda item B is to amend section 155.89 as by adding a new subsection in exception for residential elevator / wheelchair lift in the R1 district. We'll hear from Tony.
Yes, Madam Chair and members of the planning board, this zoning text amendment is to chapter 155.8.9, the expansion or enlargement. So this request for this text amendment, we received it on January the 30th, 2022. The Planning Inspections Department received this application from R. Henry Temple, MD, for the text amendment to the amendment ordinance in 155.89. Matt Nichols is the authorized agent for Dr. Temple. Back to give you some background here, the current ordinance, zoning ordinance, does not allow for elevators to encroach into our setbacks. The proposed text amendment, I'm going to read it. It's kind of brief, so I'll kind of read. This is completely new here. We'll be amending section 155.89 by adding a new subsection N as follows. Under N, the exception is just for residential elevators and lifts in the R1 district, notwithstanding foregoing in subsections A through L. Non-conforming pre-firm 1970 single-family residence in the R1 may be expanded or enlarged for purposes of adding exterior elevator, wheelchair lift to improve accessibility, providing all the following criteria are satisfied. So this is only going to apply to an R1. The older homes, is this your first time hearing the pre-firm? This is the older homes built prior to the flood. So that narrows it down a lot for single family, and then narrows it down even more for the pre-firm structures here. So under one, it's one residential elevator, wheelchair lift, providing maximum capacity of 2 people to access the first elevated floor of the single family residence, may be constructed within and encroach the side yard setbacks, provided that the elevator wheelchair lift is located no closer than 3 feet to the property line. Number 2, such expansion or enlargement shall be permitted only where the resulting separation between the residential elevator and or lift and other structures either on the same or adjoining lot, excluding fences and screening is greater than 15 feet. So you're going to have a 15-foot separation, which is the same thing when you have 2 new houses. You got 7.5 and 7.5. So you got a 15-foot setback there.
I don't understand.
Okay, I think when Matt gets up here, he's gonna have a drawing, so that way we'll be clear on what we're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
I tried to, but I just
Okay.
couldn't put that together.
We don't have to draw that.
The residential elevator wheelchair is gonna be screened from adjacent properties with lattice work or permanent screening material. The application submitted to the town for the residential elevator will be accompanied by written consent signed by the property owner adjoining to the side subject to the encroachment. So another thing has to happen, that adjoining property owner has to sign this before it can happen. And then there should be no objections to the installation of the wheelchair lift from the town planning director, fire marshal, based upon public health, safety, and welfare. The number 6, the elevator wheelchair lift must be installed in compliance with all town, county, and state codes, and also the fire code. We did send this out, the department had reviewed, there were no comments from the police department. And you see interim chief's comments here. He says, I do believe 3 feet between the elevator and a fence is getting pretty tight. Would rather see it in the front or under the deck if that's an option. And if not, I guess you could consider this. Public Works had no comments. We believe the text amendment is consistent with our plan, county land use plan statement of consistency. This has been advertised in the Star News. And then planning staff recommends that the planning board consider the text amendment to chapter 155.89 along with the statement of consistency. So it looks like here there's a lot of, even though this is allowed, if you consider it would be allowed in the setbacks, but a lot of things got to happen. It's going to have adjacent property owner sign off. You're still going to have 15 feet from the elevator and the next structure. So it's not always going to work on some of these lots. It may not can happen at all, but on this particular lot, it can happen. And I think Matt will show you that it's still got 15-foot separation, but it is 3 feet closer to the line. And you'll see that because Dr. Temple's house is closer to the street. I think the other house is pushed closer to the water. And that's why I think you see that. And Matt's got an example of that. If you got any questions for me, I'll be glad to
It's
try
4
that.
feet closer to the line instead of 3, right? You have 3 left over.
Yes, typically you have a 7.5
Right.
foot setback. If you got any questions for me, I'll.
I do, Tony. Is there anything else we allow to encroach upon
Yeah.
that, except for the, obviously the heating and air and
Yeah, we have
units and stuff?
under our open space,
Uh-huh,
we have, let's see, roofs and gutters can go in there.
uh-huh,
The service platforms, fences can encroach,
right.
driveways can encroach. Landscaping and some retaining walls can also be in there.
Mhm,
Walkways, wooden walkways of pervious grade level can be in those setbacks. And then retaining walls. So fences can be in there, trees, plantings, you name
Yeah.
it can be in there. So those are the items that the town already allows into the
Mhm.
setbacks.
I have a question. I know you said that it keeps cutting down, but do we know how many houses this is affecting?
No, we do not. I mean, don't know how many pre-firm houses we have.
Can we find that out if we needed to?
We can find that out.
Okay.
But the only thing I think would be difficult would be I think when the attorney came up with this language here, he did narrow it down. Now, I don't know how many it narrows it down to, but you still got to get approval from your next door property. It's a pre-firm house and things like that, so that really narrows it down. So, but I don't know the number.
Okay.
What's pre-firm mean?
Before the flood ordinance, so 1970. And, you know, all these houses, older homes are going to be torn down. Typically, it's in the Harbor Island area, and you have some on the beach area too. It's the older homes built.
I know all about them.
Yeah.
Tony, item 5 on page 11, at least in this book. Can you please explain what that means?
Yeah, I think when they did this ordinance here, they wanted to make sure there was no objections from the planning director and fire marshal or the fire chief. And I think it would be better here if we strike fire marshal, since it's residential, and put fire chief, that would be the local fire chief here.
But what it's saying is that unless you have an objection, your objection would be a reason that this couldn't go forward.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Yes,
that's what it's
no
saying.
objection.
So if I objected to it or the fire chief, and I'm gonna make that recommendation, we change the fire marshal to fire chief,
Yeah.
is that we couldn't even consider it. So that's another item there that would have to be looked at.
And what you just described to Karen's question about what can be in the setback,
Mhm.
you mentioned a bunch of landscaping items.
Mhm.
So the fire chief's feed or the fire department's feedback about there being 3 feet. He could encounter all sorts of chicanes trying to get. through
Typically,
those fence anyway.
it's not those things. You see the palm trees, bushes, trees, boats, trailers,
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know, they're all in those areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you didn't mention propane tanks.
Propane tanks are allowed in there too. That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there a limit how big a propane tank can be?
No, sometimes you see the larger ones are buried underground. So,
Right, okay.
So typically, those are pretty good size. Most of them they strap them to your house or whatever, but the larger ones seem to be buried
Okay.
in the setbacks.
Is there a limit to the number?
We have not ever.
Any
Yeah,
other questions? Oh,
Yeah, I
sorry.
do have another.
So in this situation, Tony, this fence, the 3 feet and the fence is in the encroachment.
Yes, yeah, fences are allowed and things like
Right.
that. Mhm.
The enclosure, when does, I'm sorry, I use the word enclosure, it talks about screening, but where's the line between screening and enclosing? Are we talking about screening only so far up and then it's completely open?
I think that's a question for Matt. I'm not sure in his PowerPoint, he may address that, the screening. I'm assuming when we're talking about the screening. If you look at this one, I think they also said it could go 1 story. So typically, it's just going to be that bottom section. I'm thinking that would be screened.
Meaning lattice.
Lattice or, yeah.
Yeah.
And these are non-conforming lots.
This is a, yes,
Okay.
yes, non-conforming pre-firmed lots, yes.
I didn't see anything in here. Is there any stipulation about if the house becomes conforming?
No, there's nothing in there. The thing about this is, so this is typically gonna be written for these older homes that have not been demoed yet, I think. And typically, you know, once this goes away, it goes away with a new house, so in the future.
Right, but there, it's not written in this that if it becomes conforming, that would go away.
Yeah, I think the lot, well, we know if the lot is non-conforming, then the lot's gonna stay non-conforming. More, I've never seen many lots become,
Okay,
unless they
right.
buy a lot next to it or whatever,
Okay.
so.
Tony, why is this written for installation in a side yard versus in a backyard or versus within the footprint, say, coming?
Well, I
up
think this
from-
was written for this particular lot on North Channel. And I think that's the only reason. You can't put it may not be allowed in the backyard on this lot because of CAMA may not would allow it, so. On this one here.
But is there anywhere else it can be installed? Is this the only place it can go?
Well, no, there could be other places. It's just, you know,
Is the back on the water?
if this lot is on the water.
I mean, the back because of the camera.
Yes,
Yes.
because CAMA, you gotta have a 30-foot setback from the normal high water line for CAMA.
You got pictures, man?
Any other questions for Tony? Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
thank you, Tony. And we'll have Matt come forward. Or Mr. Nichols, I guess I should say.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the planning board. My name is Matt Nichols. I'm here tonight representing Dr. Temple and his wife Margaret. And I do have some slides that I think will help explain the request and also maybe refer to some of the questions that were asked. And then if you have other questions, I'll try to answer them. And Dr. Temple's here also. And we appreciate y'all's consideration of this request. As Tony mentioned, this really came up. It's a very sort of specific set of circumstances and property that sort of gives rise to the request. And the way that we tried to write the text amendment is very narrow. And I don't think you're going to see it applying to many other properties for some of the reasons I'll explain with the photographs. But the purpose is to allow, in a limited instances, the installation of the elevator or wheelchair in the side yard setback. As Tony mentioned, it has to be on a non-conforming pre-firm in pre-1970 flood ordinance lot, single family homes only and only in the R1 district. And then subject to all the different criteria that we set forth. And I'll go through each of those as the presentation goes on. But the purpose is really to allow Dr. Temple and his wife to remain in their home and have better accessibility to their older home. And also would preserve the limited parking that they have in the front of the house. You'll see in the pictures, they have a garage in the front of the house. And also just the architectural design of the home. This is an older sort of classic beach cottage. And the idea of, say, putting the elevator on the front of the house is really not ideal. And it's just not really desirable. And it also would limit the parking and could limit the garage access depending on where you put it. So the property, I know that the board is very familiar with the North Channel Drive section of North Channel Drive, but looking at the photographs here, you'll see that the property is unique in that, as Tony mentioned, the way that it's situated compared to the property to the south, which I think is a big component of it, is they're really sort of offset. Our Dr. Temple's house is much closer to the street, and the house that's to the south of him on the side where the elevator is proposed is set further back. So it allows quite a bit of distancing. So here's sort of a Google Maps image, and you can see beautiful view. And you can see how the house to the south, to the right of Dr. Temple's, is set back quite a bit compared to his house. This photographs also also points out too, you can see the parking in the front is limited. You can get 3 cars in the front and it's just a shallow depth. So you'll see the sidewalk and it's a narrow lot. It's non-conforming, 50 feet wide. So there's not really any other parking out on the street in front of the, right directly in front of the house. So here is the general location of the proposed elevator on the south side of the house, on the side, not directly on the front, but such that it would be off to the side front part of the deck. And then from the overhead, you can see, again, just to point out to the board exactly where the proposed elevator would be located. So here are some sort of street view pictures of the house. As I said, you can see that the limited parking in the front and the house is pulled up closer to the street. Some different, this is sort of looking south. And then you can see, you'll see in the other photos, there's quite a bit of landscaping and trees and there's fencing in the area anyway, but the idea of sort of putting the elevator on the front of the house is something that my clients would like to not do. And I think the neighbors would also prefer to not have it on the front of the house. So if you were to walk sort of in the entryway of Dr. Temple and Mrs. Temple's house, this is sort of as you go in the front under the deck, and you would see that area right there where the flower pots are, that's where the elevator would go. If you were to go sort of looking further back, you can see when you walk sort of under the deck, you can see the stairs that take you up to the top level. And it's really the most logical place for the elevator on this particular site. Here's another sort of vantage point of showing where the elevator would go. Fortunately, there's sort of trees there that would screen it naturally. And I don't believe we would be cutting any trees to put it in that location. And then you can see the trees also sort of screen it naturally from the neighbor to the south, and you can have a visual showing the distance there, but that again is a general location where it would go. There, and then I've also got some slides showing some examples of the type of elevator. This would be looking back out toward the street. This photograph I think was taken over the summer, but you can see that even looking from the house to the street, there's nice natural vegetation there. I don't think you would notice it much from the street. And then this is where it would sort of link in, so to speak, or access on the second floor. And as Tony mentioned, the way the text amendment is written, this would only allow you to get to the second floor. If someone had a 3-story house, this would be just to get to the first elevated floor. So we tried to keep it limited as far as the function of the elevator. This was the drawings. I know there's a lot going on in this drawing. This was when the Temples added a deck addition to the back of their house, I think in 2007. So that was the general plan from that. And what we did when proposing this previously with the town was sort of show dimensionally where the elevator would go and how it would fit with the setback. I think the house generally meets the setback, the 7.5 feet. I don't think it's completely uniform along that side. It might be like 7.9 in places or 7.5, but the elevator footprint is about 4 by 4. And if the elevator goes there, that still leaves us about 3.5 feet between where the elevator would be and the property line. But to be safe, we sort of built into the ordinance that you would be closer than 3 feet. And then this was the example of the elevator model that was sort of picked out or thought to be. And it's not like an enclosed elevator like you would think in the house you put in today. It's really something that goes on to the house. And the other thing with these, here's a good example of, I'm not sure if that's the exact model, but that is about what it would look like. And with these pre-firm houses, I don't know, back in the 60s or 70s, this house was built in 64. I don't know if they were putting elevators in house in 64. If they were, it probably was not a common event. But the houses really, the older houses, they're not really designed internally, like where would you put the elevator? And it'd be very difficult to retrofit the house internally to put the elevator in. Modernly, with bigger houses, I mean, they're designing the house around the elevator. It's a feature that people want, and you can, when you're building from scratch, of course, you can design the house around that, but this would only apply to older houses. And what we're proposing tonight does not allow anybody to come in with a new house and put an elevator in the setback. It just simply wouldn't apply. It's only applying to these older existing houses, which frankly, I don't think the elevator was probably contemplated much back then. So here's another example of one of these elevator lifts. Really, it's for mobility purposes. And then this is how it generally would kind of meet with the second level. I mean, the one thing I would point out too, looking at as far as like it being a lot of times the elevator is lifted, so there's not really much on the ground level it's not really like a flood hazard or anything like that, and you can raise the elevator. It's really sort of a unique item that you would be that would be encouraging into the setback. We talked earlier about propane tanks. I mean, that would be probably a much larger footprint. That's not something you could even move if the storm was coming. So it's something that I think that really serves a good purpose, and it's just a unique use that actually gets up out of the floodplain.
Is that concrete pad in that picture?
Yes, sir.
Basically the footprint of
Yes, sir.
the system that you're talking about?
I believe so. I think the concrete pad, based on the design I saw, is probably a little bit bigger than the actual what you would stand in or sit in to go up the elevator. But I think that that's sort of a little bit larger than the actual footprint of the elevator itself.
Safe to leave it up during storms and stuff
I would think.
instead of down.
I would think so. We've got to meet all the state building codes and all local codes. So whatever would be required there, but I don't think it would be something that they don't seem to be very, I'm not an expert, but it wouldn't seem to catch the wind and be like that, a concern in that way.
What's the dimensions with the screening in place?
With the screening in place, it would roughly be about 4 by 4. The elevator itself, I don't think, there's a different model for Dr. Temple. I don't think it's
3.5 by
3.5.
And actual elevator, and then
if you would.
outside dimensions and everything, you say 4.
We're approximating 4 feet by 4 feet, which would include the screening. And so as far as the specific parts of the text amendment, and Tony did a great job sort of going through them, and I would just highlight a few things. As mentioned, that only applies to residential wheelchair and elevator lifts. It would be for only the older non-conforming lots with pre-1970 homes. It's only going to apply in the R1 district, and it has to meet the following criteria. We're trying to limit it in size to 2 people. It has to be, it can encroach within the setback, but it would have to still be less than 3 feet from the property line.
And that's our least.
I'm sorry, could you repeat
You
that?
meant at least 3 feet.
It would have to still be, I'm sorry, yes,
Yeah,
but
okay.
if I spoke,
Okay.
I apologize.
Oh,
It would still have to be, once installed, it would still have to be 3 feet from the property line. Then it must be, this point came up earlier, and I've got a diagram showing it, but at the end of the day, so to speak, if it was installed, it would still have to be 15 feet from any other structure, whether on the lot itself or on an adjacent lot. So you can see with Dr. Temple's house, for example, there's quite a bit of distance between his house and the neighbor to the south. And then if you were to look at it from above, when Dr. Temple measured it, it would be over 15 feet from the nearest point on that house to where the elevator would be. So that's quite a bit of distance. That would be roughly what you would have typically between 2 pre-firm houses anyway, 7.5 feet and 7.5 feet. And I think that's where it's really a unique situation, because I don't think you're going to find too many instances where the houses aren't more uniform in alignment. The front of the house is lining up. If that was the case here, it wouldn't work. So there's got to be quite a bit of distance between you and your neighbor to make this work. I don't know which other houses on the beach would qualify. But my guess is it's probably not a whole lot. The other safeguard that we sort of built into this would be, well, before I get to that, we talked about it being screened, and we've got a couple examples of that here. Here's an example. The elevator contractor that Dr. Temple was working with sent a picture. This is not from Wrightsville Beach. I believe it's from a different beach in North Carolina, but this is showing, you can kind of see the top of the elevator there, but it's fully screened with lattice or boarding there. And then this was an example of the type of lattice Dr. Temple was proposing, but I don't think that's, I mean, that's really, I guess.
I just checked it. That's what's already in place around my house, around outdoors storage area. So it probably look more like that as the screening material that would hide it from the neighbors in the street view.
But I think sort of one safeguard in all this to make sure that the screening is going to sort of look right, so to speak, and the landscaping is going to look right, is we're proposing you have to get your adjoining property owner to sign the application to the town. So that to me is probably the biggest safeguard here, where if the next door neighbor that's going to be, you would say, mostly affected, and in this case, I don't think the next door neighbor is going to be really affected at all. But I know Dr. Temple's had very good discussions with his neighbor who is supporting this. And we want to make sure that if someone else is proposing this, or even we're proposing it, that the neighboring property owner agrees to it and says, fine, I'll allow this. And I think that process would help assure that the screening is going to meet, the neighbor's going to be okay with it. And so there's probably discretion in what kind of screening you could do, or even what kind of landscaping. But I could envision a scenario where the neighbor says, okay, well, you meet all the criteria, but I'd like you to, maybe we'd like to plant a tree here, or we'd like the lattice to look like this, or maybe that sort of thing. So I think there would be, and I think that would be a good part of the process, because at that point, the applicant can't even really come to the town with the application until they have the neighbor sign off on it. And I think that's a big safeguard in all of it. So, but Dr. Temple indicates that his neighbor is fully on board with them having the elevator. And from what I understand, the neighbor would actually prefer it to be on the side and not on the front of their house.
So the application would include a specification for the screening?
It should, yes, sir, it can. I think that it has to be screened, so I think that that's an appropriate.
Well, it has to be agreed.
Has
Or
to
at
be.
least what you're provoking here is it has to be agreed, so they have to agree to something that physically you can look at, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I think that's where, so by the time it gets to Tony's desk or Robert's desk, I think a lot of the things would have been worked out between the two neighbors as to what it's going to look like. Or the neighbor just simply would say, I don't think that is going to work. Or if you did X, Y, and Z, I would be okay with it. So.
Matt, I have another question. So like if this encroaches 3 feet in the setbacks, and then there's plantings that, is there anything that states there's like 3 feet of clearance between this elevator, and to make sure there's no bushes between the elevator and the fence, so that if the fire needed to get through there, they could, because that was one of the concerns. The only concern that I saw was where the fire chief mentioned that, it was a little tight.
Yes, no, that's a great point. And similar to the sort of going to your property owner and making sure your property owner's happy, the sort of the last provision in here is you've got to make the planning director and the fire chief happy. So I think it would be case by case basis, but I think that's a great point. In our particular instance, I think that given the distancing and the sort of the existing conditions, we feel confident that we could, if we needed to, move things or move the fence or something like that to satisfy the fire chief, I feel like we could do that. But if we can't, then we can't, and we wouldn't be allowed to do this. And I think that is also like a big safeguard in all this, that the fire chief and Tony would look at this and say, okay, you meet all of the requirements, but we still have some concern of access in an emergency situation. So either we're
This
not,
giant bush sitting between, you know,
you can remove
the
the
elevator
bush.
and the fence. I'm not suggesting take fences down at all, but like, you know, if
But
there's gotta be some kind of clearance there. I
'Cause
would
you're-
think
I
from
know
a
what you're
fire
saying.
safety standpoint, but
And you're also, because you were saying that there would be, maybe if they need to plant a tree or there'll be some natural not barriers, but things, how do you do that? 3 feet elevator, all in 7.5 feet. But I know what you're saying. That would be one of my concerns too.
Would not apply to anything in the setback then.
No,
what's that?
but the fire chief was not that happy with the situation. He was not. It says, I do believe 3 feet between an elevator and a fence is getting pretty tight.
Yeah.
And that would be the thing right there. One of the things that bothered me.
Whose fence is it? Yours?
And so we could take
Down, you
the
had to-
fence down, or we could put an access, we can cut out a place and put access in there. I actually interpreted I think the fire chief makes, a perfectly great point here. But I don't know that he actually has seen our instance. And so I think that's certainly a valid point with the text amendment. I wouldn't expect anything sort of less than that. I think that you have to look at each case individually, and that's what we would be proposing with this. So with the text amendment, we're not asking the town to approve Dr. Temple's elevator tonight. He's still gonna have to come in with the.
Would you have an issue with putting in number 5, that rather than just saying there'd be no objection, that the fire chief has to sign off on it?
Sure, I mean,
Okay.
he would have to sign off on it.
I mean, but I don't know that I read that from this text amendment the way it's written. It just says he has no objection. Look how many times we've seen something come back, go, oh, he didn't have an objection because it didn't get read. If it's signed off on, he had to read it and see it. And I think there's a little bit of difference there. If that's
fine.
okay, okay.
Yeah, that's fine. And that's.
How many
Yeah.
times we get in here and
Yeah.
they don't respond, so.
They don't respond because they haven't seen it for some reason or
Right.
another. So just want to be sure that doesn't happen.
Yes,
Right.
ma'am. We're totally fine with that.
Okay.
We sort of envision this being reviewed specifically by planning director and the fire chief to make sure everyone's on board. Nobody wants an unsafe situation with it. And I think that's peace of mind for the neighbor and for the applicant owner. If there's something we could do on the site that would improve accessibility, then I'm sure we could do it.
Good question for Tony, if it's appropriate before. I mean, that's not necessarily finished, but it's relevant to what we're talking about.
Okay.
Tony, what would be the process prior to this as far as how such a thing would be reviewed?
Well, I think Cheryl and Susan brought up some good points. Sometimes the department heads don't look at it thoroughly, or after we vote on it, you vote on it, then they'll say something about it. But I think the best thing to do is to be able to sign off on it, to like when the building inspector signs off on it, we sign it with our name, we put our date on there and or initial it. So I think that's the good thing is to have the plans signed off by our fire chief, not fire marshal, fire chief. So I think that can happen, just a signature.
So that's a new part of the process.
Yes.
Okay, but then wouldn't that apply to anything else going into the setback?
No,
Why just exclusive to
no.
to an
Fire,
elevator?
typically, we send text amendments to them if we're doing something in the setbacks, but no, that's not a requirement for the fire chief. Now, some of these SUPs we're going to be seeing, we have meetings and they're in those meetings, but typically, fire chief has not signed off. Fire marshal would get involved on commercial projects, not residential.
But if we institute that kind of a process,
Mhm.
why would it not be applied to other things going into a setback?
Gets
Because it's not
overwhelming.
required. I mean, it's not
But
required.
it creates just the same exact issue that the.
Yeah, I mean,
she's raising.
Like, give an example of what you mean.
Propane tanks,
Well,
outdoor showers.
yeah, we never have done that. But
Stands.
we've never done it before, allowing that, but typically that person, we send the text amendments to them for the gas tanks and things like that, so.
To the
but
fire
on-
chief.
Yeah, to the fire chief, but on something like this, we could say, he needs to sign the plans, not just no comments or it's okay or whatever, so that's a
But there's no
possibility.
ordinances that describe specifically the other stuff that can go into the space, into the setback, other than it has to be within the 4 feet.
Yes, commercial is the only time that typically our fire chief and the fire marshal gets involved. Typically on residential projects, they don't sign off on anything like that, just the commercial stuff.
I'm just stuck on the fact that why just elevators if the other stuff could be just as harmful? Or
I don't
just the same
disagree,
scenarios.
but it's not.
I don't know how
before
you're
us.
gonna monitor like land, I mean,
Well,
somebody
well,
could
yeah,
plant like a
then-
bush, are we
Well,
gonna
what you're
start
gonna hear from
regulating?
the fire chief and others is, that's not the issue. The issues are
Yeah.
plantings, trees,
Mhm.
gates.
Right, yeah,
I can't, the fire,
there's no way to
There's-
monitor all.
yeah,
that.
so that's the
So
biggest.
why specify then here with this? That's all I'm saying.
Because we're making an exception.
I don't know the answer to that question, Neil, but I have a hard time with anything added to encroachments. Because you just don't open up putting different things in encroachments.
There's already such a list.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's allowed.
Yeah, and they've been allowed since day one,
Mhm.
so. But I think you could on this one. I think they're willing to, you got the property owner, which is a miracle, I think, to get a property owner to sign off on your elevator. But I think you could require the fire chief to sign off on this.
Thank you.
And it's just kind of a structure, which is different than trees and
It is different. That could be put
gas
somewhere else,
tanks.
maybe.
and- Yeah. I agree that anything else, there shouldn't be anything there. It's very difficult. Like that line of palm trees down on Federal Street. And if a fire truck had to get in there, that'd be.
Okay. Matt, did you have anything else you wanted? Sorry about that.
Sorry.
No,
yeah.
no, thank you, Cheryl, the comments. I maybe have one or two more slides. We talked about it, it has to meet all the codes, including the fire code. And that's the last slide, so. I think in conclusion, I do appreciate the general viewpoint of how, why are we allowing more things into the setback, or, what, or where does it end, sort of thing. But I think in this particular instance, I mean, we're talking about accessibility, and it's the ability to stay in your home and have access to your home, not only for you, but maybe for other family members. You might have parents that are getting older, and I think that's a real thing. And I know Dr. Temple and Mrs. Temple, they want to stay in their home, and it's one of those things where this would make things a lot easier on family members and themselves, sort of in the future. And I think there's something to be said too about sort of preserving, to the extent that the town can, sort of the older homes that are left. At some point, this text amendment will be completely moot, because there's not going to be probably many pre-1970 homes left. So I think it's very limited, and going forward, it's not going to apply to new construction. And I think as time goes on, you'll see less and less of it being applied to where it probably doesn't apply much at all. But it's to allow folks to stay in their older home and allow family members to enjoy the home and guests and friends to enjoy the home with the accessibility. So I completely appreciate the point of not adding more to the setback, but I do think this is a unique instance, and it's something we appreciate your consideration, and I'm glad to try to answer any questions.
I think it's unfortunate that we didn't have the aerial photo and the ground layout in the package, because that was kind of new information. I would like you to put the aerial photo up, if you could, and then the ground layout. So this, the south side of the house, that long white rectangular area, which I assume is the roof that goes over the deck
Yes,
that runs from front to back.
yes, sir.
So that's all deck, and a stairway comes up somewhere middle of that from the ground up to the first floor.
Yes, sir.
So why couldn't this thing be installed coming up from underneath in the deck area? Or alternatively, where that deck, that roofing ends on the south side, you have that large open space. On the north side, you have that back part of the house. I know you said deck, but it doesn't look like a deck, it looks like a pitched roof. But in other words, there's alternative spaces where this thing could be accommodated.
Well-
And not necessarily requiring this kind of a change.
I would respectfully disagree. I don't know that I have enough photographs here. Let me go back to the other ones.
Well,
It-
All right, go back to the,
Yeah, let's go back to the one.
where it shows
Here.
the measurement.
The
Okay.
plot.
Let me talk about this one first, and then I'll come back, and Dr. Temple might want to help, because he's, yeah, come on up, Dr. Temple, because you're most familiar with it.
A couple of things.
Dr. Temple, can you just, can you just state your name and?
My name is
Address.
Henry Temple, Rufus Henry Temple,
Mm.
and I live at 210 North Chandler Drive.
Okay.
And we've had this house since 1988.
It's just for documentation purposes. Thanks.
Great. Well, if I could just say a couple of things, because I really don't want to do this. It's costing a lot of money, but I love this house and we've had it since 1988. I'm a disabled veteran, Vietnam veteran who has injured in the knee, and I have feet problem, and I have difficulty walking up steps. My wife has knee surgery, has difficulty walking up the steps. I have to carry my 14-and-a-half-year-old dog up and down the steps. My children's in-laws, one is wheelchair bound. We have others who are on canes. As we age, I'm 77. As we get older, I don't think we can live in this house as it is now. And we did look at every square foot in this house of where we could put an elevator and not even put it on the outside. And there was none. We've had architects, it just doesn't work. And then we looked at the front of the house, like but if you look at the front of the house, and we don't have a picture of a cross, but on the far left-hand side is my garage. So we don't want to close off the garage. And then there's a door to a den. May I approach?
Yes.
Be careful on the steps.
Thank you. This is my garage, so I don't really want to put it here. This is the only door on this side. There are two doors, and you talk about fire safety and a house, one on the other side and one here. This is the only door to get outside from that other. So I don't want to put it up through here and block that door. And then right here is all, first of all, it's all the utilities going into my house goes right here. The water main, all the electricity, everything goes right here. And then this is the access to the back with the steps. So across this, there was no good place to do it. And the other side, kind of the same reasons. There is no fire truck that is going to get through here. If we put an elevator here, it will not impede access to the front any more than it's already impeded by stuff that's in place. So in other words, it doesn't make it, we're not harming any access that is already there. In other words, if we put an elevator right here, going back this way, you still can't get a fire truck through there. You can go down here, or you can go to the other side of the house. But putting this elevator here, screening, does not impede the fire department getting there, because there's a line of myrtle trees down there anyhow that's going to block them going down. So it doesn't make it any less safe than it is. And our idea is this place puts it 15 feet, 10.5 inches by my measurement this afternoon from the furthest corner of where this, the closest to my neighbor's house to his steps, not even his house, is 15 feet 10 inches. So we're already further away than any other part of my house from his house. My neighbor and I, all my neighbors get along. North Channel is a great place to live on. And actually, we're collecting signatures. We have no one who objects, and everybody likes our plan. Lisa Weeks, who you all know, she owns the house across. She signed a petition requesting that when it goes before the board that they allow it. Our neighbors not only do not object, they encourage this plan. And he said, I mean, they're good. I take care of his house. He lives in Raleigh. I got keys to his house, and the last thing is, when I go, all this ago, this is an old house, and nobody's going, the prices of houses on our street, they all come down when they're sold. If we ever have a hurricane, it goes away because I have to bring it back to. So and I'm 77 years old, so it's just not going to be there that long. But it does allow us to live in that house and stay in that house for the next, I hope, more than 15 years, but about 15 years. And I think with no hurricane, that's about as long as it's going to last. With a hurricane, it's not going to last that long. But it's just something to allow a senior citizen with disabilities to stay in their house. And I'll have one last point. It's still and you were talking about encroachments, and nothing should be an encroachment. Who in the world came up with HVACs in the encroachment? They're building up new houses with that. And I would maintain that my elevator allows me disabled people to access their own home. It probably has a higher priority than somebody sticking their HVAC within 3 feet of the house of the property line. And that's allowed for anybody, even the new construction, forever. And mine is a very special situation, not likely to be replicable anywhere on the beach, and it's going to go away. So that's the kind of what we feel, and we'd like to stay in our house.
All right. Anybody have any questions for Dr. Temple?
I would like to go back to the ground drawing.
Can you give the floor plan?
Yeah,
This one,
Yes.
so,
this is the edge of my house.
Yeah. That's the
And
end of
there's
your house?
Under here, you can go all the way. Here is access with the boardwalk.
I'm sorry, that's the edge of your property.
That's the
No, this is not
Edge
the
of
edge
the
of the
house.
property, I don't believe.
That's the edge of the deck. So how come you can't put it down there where it says existing steps to be moved?
Where?
And that's, yeah, in the corner there, where the steps are gonna be moved. Why would an elevator work right here?
So let me go back to the slide here. If you look first, and so if you look into the property, so you're talking about this all sort of what you get through getting back in there.
Okay.
And the deck is not as wide as you would think up there to put the elevator up and through the deck. I don't, if you're.
Yeah, we had floor plans before, I think, that had the measurements of the decking,
On the,
not today.
All I can say is it has been looked at by architects, elevator people, and the most desirable place from all of their standpoints and from our neighbor's standpoint and our standpoint is this. It's not a situation we took lightly. I think one of the reasons here, this is where we go here, and if this would cut off, I'm trying to get access under here. I'm not sure you can come up here.
So what's been written,
But one of the main problems is if you get out of your car with groceries and stuff like that, and you want to get up, the best way is to come straight up out the door, even through this door or down the front, and not have to arrange for an 80-year-old person to carry heavy bags down a walkway around here and coming back. And plus visually, none of my neighbors want to see a elevator on their water side. That's what everybody looks at, and they don't want to see an industrial looking. I can't answer the question that maybe it might could have put in there, but it's not the optimal. It is the less desirable for ourselves and all our neighbors. And that's what I can say.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on this? Okay,
I guess I do have a question.
okay.
Why wouldn't you just go the route of a variance?
We tried that. Yeah, the board denied the variance request.
And on what basis did they do that? They just didn't want it in the setback?
I can't really speak for the board. We certainly respect the board's decision, but they found that we didn't meet the criteria. But we tried to go that route. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess we'll close that portion, public portion, and discuss. Anybody have any?
I do.
You'd like to say? Go ahead, Leanne.
And I would go to Kitty about this because, I mean, I know I live in an older home and I think I sympathize and I totally get it. I do. And I've ridden by and I looked at the property and I see, it does look tight, but I couldn't see the front. Like I couldn't see any other place other than under the deck. And I know that's not feasible, but, and I know that there's, I went through this with one of my neighbors. They put the chair that goes up the house, but then that doesn't help you with groceries. And like you said, groceries and the dog and whatever else, or visitors or whatever. So I get it. And I think some of us, me being one of them, might be in that position sooner rather than later. I hope you have more 15 years, but I mean, at first I had an issue with it when I rode by and looked and everything, but I think I do feel a little differently about it. That's just my thought.
I suddenly realized I had a conflict of interest. Because I'm a 77-year-old old person.
Well, that's why I said I
My
kind of
heart
was looking.
just says, oh.
I know, and that's
Yeah.
why I kind of wanted your opinion because
These
you're-
old houses are impossible to deal with.
yeah, they are.
Yeah,
And,
you
and
can't, if you give up a parking space, you don't get
you
one.
don't get one.
Yeah. I mean, I finally have parking for the first time in 55 years. So I understand his parking. They don't want it on the waterfront. He has a neighbor that says, okay. The second somebody buys that house from the Temples, it's gone.
Gone down. It's gonna
And the
be
problem is
bulldozed.
removed. I have absolutely not a single objection.
I agree with Kitty. And the other thing too is I hate seeing old homes get torn
Yes,
down.
me too.
And it just absolutely fires
It's a
me
sad
up.
day when
It's
they
a
haul it
sad
off,
day
I
when
can tell you that.
they do
Yeah.
that. So to want to stay in your home, I totally get it. And I think if we all think about it for a few minutes.
The fact that his neighbor, and we haven't actually seen that, but do you have that, the letter from his neighbor, does that come later?
That comes.
Well,
with
I think that the
application.
thing is, this is the process, and then it's just like meeting the building code, so it will be something that we will get from them.
Because that's a
like
real, that's a
notarized letter,
must.
yes.
That, there's nothing more important than the letter from the neighbor.
I will say there was the letter when we went for
The first time it was, right?
And it's the same neighbor,
Okay.
and he said he's willing to make it stronger. We are very close friends. And I look after him and he pretty much looks after us. He helps me with projects I need when I need to fix my.
These things are ugly. There's no way around it.
No, I've
My
seen this one
neighbor
down the
has
street.
one and
My
they're
neighbor has
ugly.
one.
But and they don't have the framing around theirs, which
Neither
would
does
certainly help. That will help. But the fact that there's that space, because that other house is so far back and his is so far forward, there's space there that makes it not right on top of the other man's house. Other man agrees. This man is 77 years old. He wants to stay in his house. I wish I was still in my house. And I understand Like I say, that house is gone the second that that family sells it.
I told you if you build me an ensuite,
But help me out, what makes that house gone?
you'll get.
That, we're
For all those
assuming
reasons.
that,
For all
we're
those
assuming that,
reasons.
we're assuming that,
There's
there's no,
nobody wants to buy a house anymore where you can't park.
well, I get that, but there's nothing written in this that says it goes away. So do we reword it so that it's with that ownership?
I think.
So I'm agreeing with you,
Yes,
but I
I
think we
agree.
need it written in there.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
And I would like to see how many houses this affects before I
So
can.
you're saying if it's sold, they have to take the elevator out?
I think if you want to look at
You
it,
can't.
it goes away, you can look at our street. The other thing is, I think I've had to listen to construction at my house for 5 years straight, and it's
There aren't
one
many of
after
them left.
another, house has been torn down. Very rectangular, very tall houses replace them. And you can go down my street and I mean, 10 on North Channel Drive. I think that would not be a high number in the last 10 years. Nobody buys, there's not one single instance of a house being sold on North Channel Drive that the house did not go away, not one.
Okay, so
But I struggle with the wording desirable. Can it be put
Versus not
somewhere
feasible.
versus, yeah, not
And the word
possible?
desirable was used, and the pictures don't really tell the story about what that corridor truly looks like for the backside. So from the floor plan and the aerial photo, there may be other feasible options. They're just not,
Well, we can always
been brought
come,
forward.
we can always come back to this our next meeting with better pictures from the front side, and maybe then we could find out if there's more properties that, and Tony, I know you said it was a lot, but, and I don't want you to have to, but, you know, that's something.
How
we can-
much?
This isn't a rush job, gotta be done next month thing, but that's one of our options.
Well, we do, I mean, it's rushed, we have family members, when we started this, it's more than a year ago. And we do have family members that cannot come to our house. Because, I mean, the only urgency is we haven't got that many years, so 1 year is a lot of percentage of what's left. And so I do have wheelchair family that we haven't had at our house for 3 or 4 years that we would love to have and return our house to some kind of social interaction with family and friends.
Well, it sounded like the board had a problem with it, or the first go around.
yeah, but I
So-
do have to remind that we did close the public portion, all due respect, Dr. Temple, but we did close so if we ask a question, right, then
He can answer.
you can answer, right? So,
Yeah, we were just
Um,
gonna discuss it amongst
Yeah.
yourself, but you just.
So- yeah.
Tony, how difficult would it be to figure out? I mean, I know you can't, how many
I think we-
pre-firm houses anyway?
Yeah,
At
I
least
think
the
we-
number.
We can do it. I think this is very unique situation where it's only gonna work when that structure is separated. It's gonna take some time to do something like that, so that's up to the board.
How would you do it?
Do what? I
Tell me
think,
how you would do that.
well, I'd get
I mean,
Robert
other
on the
than going-
GIS.
Other than going online and.
Well, I think you go online, you start looking,
Oh my
and then you
God,
start
yes.
looking at the dates of the construction.
I'd have to figure out when the houses were built,
I
and
know.
then, after a list of addresses, I'd have to go in and measure them.
So you have to look at every single.
Oh, yeah.
it's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, that is a lot. What I would like to know is why the board turned it down.
Well, that was a completely different
Yeah,
hearing.
it
That
was.
a
The
variance
first time
hearing.
it was easy to turn down. Basically, didn't you think? First time we heard it?
I don't honestly remember that. You remembered
just
it.
heard it on the Board of Adjustment.
I
Yeah.
remember
Yeah, we
it.
didn't hear.
Oh, did
I
you hear
don't-
it on the Board of Adjustment?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't on the plan.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a separate thing, so.
I'm sorry.
There's very specific criteria that you have to pinpoint on a variance.
I do remember.
Variances
that
are
the-
difficult to get.
Yeah, I do remember why. It was because that they thought that was not the only place it
Yeah,
could be
and
put.
there has to be those 3 reasons in a variance.
Huh?
There has to be those 3 reasons in a
Yes,
variance.
yes, yes.
we're kind of coming to the same thing, that there are maybe other options, there's other feasible spots, but
Well, that's why I said that could we possibly, it says there's a little bit of maybe not, kind of a couple of questions, how many other properties would we be better off asking for better pictures from the other side? Because that picture, even me going to see, I couldn't see down through all the bushes. Could we get a better shot, pictures from the front or from the side, somehow to show us all the way around that side?
Well, you
Right?
don't want to be on the water side.
No, I know that, but I'm saying all the way down the side.
but why is that a factor? The locations?
I just think as far as neighbors go, that neighbors wouldn't want it on the water side. As far as getting,
They would
yeah,
object to it.
yes, they would object to it.
I would if I were.
So that is not,
Yes.
that is
But-
not an
But
option.
if it's on the water side, it's not necessarily requiring this text amendment.
Well, they just said
It
something
was
about
30 feet.
And then-
Kama has
No,
30.
no,
Yeah.
that he could put, it was 42 feet. It wouldn't have been in
Yeah,
the
he
30
had a
feet.
camera reason for that.
No, not to go where, at the end of that deck, it was 42 feet.
42 feet from the
Yep,
bulkhead.
yep,
That first floor.
yep.
But then he was saying about bringing groceries.
All the
and
way
that.
around to the
I
back.
understand that.
Down, So, I mean, I'm gonna.
I mean, I don't feel like I could vote for it. I would like to table it and think about it and see if we can't get the rest of the drawings. I still struggle with if there are other options that they're not taking.
Yeah.
I do appreciate what he's trying to do, and I would like to work with him in any way we can to make that happen.
I'd like to
I
hear
agree.
from the fire chief and have a signed statement.
Yeah, I think that needs to be worded in that.
So you're saying if he goes around back, that he's not gonna be as close to the neighbor?
He's just not gonna be within the 30 feet of CAMA, so it's not a CAMA issue.
No. You're talking about going all the
He's
way
not
to
gonna
the
be-
back.
I don't know those dimensions, but
Yeah.
it looks as if it was there,
He wouldn't be in the
he
setback.
wouldn't be in the setback, so it's not an
If
issue.
he was where,
And his
Where
neighbors-
those stairs are gonna be
and
removed.
I don't see how the neighbor would have any say if it's,
If it's on, it's within his setbacks, his neighbor wouldn't have any say, right?
Mhm.
So, did you investigate that spot?
Dr. Temple, I don't want to speak out of turn here. We certainly can take additional photographs. And as when we were sort of summarize the hearing at the Board of Adjustment, which was a much different hearing. It's a quasi judicial hearing. It's a entirely different criteria. We're here before this board in a legislative manner, meaning you all can do what you want to do. But with the Board of Adjustment, it's very limited. There's 4 criteria and it's an evidentiary hearing and that sort of thing. But from what I recall, the idea is, could you put the elevator on the front of the house? And the answer is yes. You could put the elevator on the front of the house. That's not what we want to do. There's problems with that. We lose parking. We potentially block the garage. Dr. Temple mentioned something about his utilities. So
And the only access out, the only access, there's 2 ways to get in our house, on the water side and this side. And so if we had a fire on one side of the house and we're in our bedrooms at the back of the house, if we block this, we can't get out of our house. We would have to go through a fire to get from the bedroom through the water side of the house, whereas this door on the front of the house allows us access to get out and go down the stairs. The far left, it blocks our garage. Then that just brings us right beside where we are. But if we put it on the house there, it still lacks a driveway. It goes over the pad where all the plumbing goes under to the house. All my water mains are there. It would be just very difficult to put it there.
I think the discussion is focused on other spots than
Yeah,
that front and the
the
side.
front is
And it
difficult.
keeps
We
coming back to the
understand.
front and
The
side.
back is difficult
It's,
because we hate it and all our neighbors hate it. And the idea is to try to have a community where everybody is getting along and likes each other and not do anything that is an eyesore to our neighbors. And we picked this out in consultation to a neighbor, to put it in a very inaccessible, I mean, it's the least obtrusive place to put it. It is already kind of landscaped there. It's just on the side of the house. It's not too far from the other. My neighbor likes it there. All of my other neighbors like it where we're there. This is the neighborhood consensus of the best place to put the elevator. And there might be other criteria according to the town that it might be not to get into setback, but the setback literally means nothing because of where it is, because you already can't get the fire trucks through. You can't get anything through there like it is, and putting the elevator does not make it any worse or any better. It's exact same access to the water side of the house with or without the elevator. It makes no change because of the trees that are growing behind it that are not going away anyhow. So by putting it there, we're not harming the fire department or anybody else access to the other side of the house. The only thing it does is allow us and our neighbors to put it in the place where we had decided it was most aesthetically pleasing and most useful. If you go down the side of the house, it requires carrying and moving stuff, whereas from that truck there is probably 12 feet versus 40 or 50 feet. And if you're 80 years old or 90-year-old with groceries or whatever, that makes a lot of difference. And so, yeah, I think you can look over what fits in the rules, but the whole house doesn't fit in the rule. It's non-conforming, it's old, and it's not going to fit anybody's rules anyhow. It just is after hours and even, I mean, not hours, I just multiple hours and talking to architects, talking to the elevator guy, talking to our neighbors. Everyone says this is the best place to put it aesthetically and for utility. And that's all I can say. I mean, it's just the best place to go, and it doesn't make a situation any worse than it is now as far as the use of encroachments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the last thing I would say, just to clarify, would be, I mean, I think there's something to be said with proximity to this is about accessibility to the vehicular parking, the off-street parking, the driveway parking of having the elevator there, and not, as Dr. Temple mentioned, sort of circuitously going back through the house around the existing stairway on the side of the house and going to the elevator in the back of the house. So
It just makes it, if you're 80 years old or 90 years old or whatever, every foot makes a difference. I mean, it's just easier to walk 10 feet than it is 100 feet.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So we're still in discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Well, I think they called that, somebody had a question.
She
for
had a
them, so
question, but
that's
we
why,
got
yeah.
a lot
yeah,
more than the
so,
question.
I think what was put forward is trying to gain some sense of how big this issue could be across other properties.
Mhm.
I'm perplexed between desirability and non-feasibility, and I don't understand how to judge the other alternatives here. And I think the burden is on the applicant to come forward with something that helps us understand that better. On the other hand, I understand getting old and not being able to get
Me too.
upstairs. So I'd like to find a solution, but I don't think we're there yet. To the points that Cheryl raised earlier.
I mean, I would agree. I mean, and as I look at it, I know he doesn't want it, but there's probably 4 feet between that garage door and the door upstairs. You know, it could go between those two and not block the door and not block the garage door.
Yeah.
Granted, they don't want it at the front of the house, but then if I'm changing a text amendment, do I change a text amendment because somebody doesn't want to do something? Is I struggle with that.
And the argument about neighbors and neighbors matter, but only to a certain point. And what happened to all the screening that was going to happen? So how did this become an eyesore when it wasn't? Now it is an eyesore because it just changed locations, and I don't follow that. So I just would like to rule out that something's not feasible.
Well, if we table this for just another 30 days, what would we want, what would we be asking? We would ask for,
I think Cheryl mentioned she would like to know how many other houses
yep.
this would.
I don't want him to have to go. Is there any way to know, Tony, like how many are pre-firm without doing a house by house by house
Well, I
search?
think it has to be done and, it can be done. I'm not gonna say it can't.
I know, but
So,
it seems like just an entirely amount of work for,
but then when you say pre-firm, okay, then you gotta decide, okay, how many are 15 feet away? It's gonna narrow it down some more too. So we gotta look at that also.
And not all of them are 2 floors.
And then it's just gonna affect, this elevator can only go up 1 floor, so if it's 2 stories above, it won't even apply to those that are 2 stories or whatever.
or it won't apply to their second floor.
Yes.
If
right.
you approve, if we approve it, we'll find out how many houses.
Yeah.
What?
If we approve it, we'll find out right away how many houses there are,
Fancy homes.
because everybody would want that, and it would be good for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I'm in healthcare, so I struggle with people who have access to, especially their home and being able to stay in their home and, so,
I think.
but I also see what you mentioned, do you open Pandora's box but it is more constrained, I think, because you have to have your neighboring person sign a letter, and it has to be, if we have it such that it's signed off by the fire chief.
What about the 15 feet thing? Is that written, do you want that written in there?
It is, isn't it?
Is written,
I think it
Uh-huh,
is, yeah.
So that's a pretty good,
That limits, I would
Yes.
assume, a lot of
that,
it.
that does a lot of
Yeah.
elimination right there with the 15 feet.
Mhm.
The board expects us to ask the questions that we've asked and
Yeah.
Right.
to make a decision based on those answers
That's
that we
right.
get. And since we don't have those answers,
And it just, I know this is just. For us to tell him that he has to put that elevator on the front porch. If it were me, I would die if I had to put it on the front porch. His garage, he needs, y'all never lived without parking. It's-
Oh, I don't have a lot
Yeah,
either.
It's very difficult, and that, all that plumbing in this goes in on his
Right.
right-hand side. His garage is on the left-hand side, so you're telling him that he's gotta put it right up in the middle of the front of his house.
no, we haven't said that.
But no, this is just an example of where it could go. And so if we wanna say, well, it's feasible to put it in front,
Well, there's also that right corner
yeah.
where the 2 porches meet,
But
but
you just said a minute ago that you thought it was that he had room to put it on the front. And he does. But would you really want him to?
no, but and it's not him that I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, we're coming in here, we're changing the text amendment.
Yeah.
Who all are we doing this for? And that's the hard part. If it's him and 3 other houses, then it's a whole different, like
I
you
think the
said.
15 feet is a biggie and the neighbor is a biggie. And, putting it around back, I thought it was closer to the water than the 40 feet. Thought it was closer.
There's part of the house that is,
Yeah.
and then
okay.
it kind of comes in. But
Okay.
yeah, I know what you're saying. And I
So,
agree with him that,
Yeah.
trying to carry it back there
yeah.
is not easy either.
But would that be 15 feet from the neighbor?
I'd probably be more.
Yeah.
I would think it would be certainly
Oh, no,
less
that's
than
right, the
15
neighbor's
feet.
But he's not in the
Oh, you're
setback.
talking
Yeah.
about,
It's a moot point.
He's not in this, he's out of the 7.5 foot setback.
Yeah, if he puts it there, there's no setback problem.
Well, what should we ask to see
Sure.
more specific pictures of that decking? Would that,
I would like those spots that we've discussed to understand how it's not feasible.
yeah, I would
Because
like to see pictures.
from what I can see or imagine, it's feasible from looking down at it or from that ground plan or the floor plan.
Around the side or the back, you mean? Is that what you mean?
So,
Plus the front.
If it's truly not feasible, then it kind of moves in the direction of it being no brainer.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I don't think that's asking too much. If we just table it for another 30 days, our next meeting will be, let's see, whenever it is, April, whatever. Just get these pictures and just get a better, and then in 30 days, and
I'm sorry, I thought I heard it on this board before.
No,
But
It's
if we
okay.
get- if we
They
get
all
something
run
where-
together.
You know, we,
So-
we can.
Hold on one second, because we have to ask, I have to ask them, since we closed the public portion, I think I'm doing this right. I have to ask if we can allow you
Open it
to,
back up.
yeah, to come back
To
up.
table it.
Yeah, so,
I was just trying to clarify something, a point she made in my mind, what she was asking.
mhm.
And I don't know if that's.
Well,
I
I
think after
can-
you finish the discussion, we can clarify
Yeah.
what he's asking.
Okay, so we'll do that. So after we finish the discussion, we'll clarify.
Yeah.
We'll have you come back up,
Thank you.
Dr. Temple, and clarify. So. if everybody's okay with that.
Yeah.
So,
we agree that we're gonna table this until
well, I think you feel very strongly about tabling it, and Neil,
Neil feels very strong about
I, you know.
I do not want the town to go up and down and search through all the houses.
I don't
it.
either.
I don't, I mean, this
I think their
is,
time can be
Do it
better
without
spent.
that. I think you can.
we should be able to
Yeah,
make a decision.
Yeah, I agree with
Yeah.
Susan,
I do too.
Yeah.
That's a lot of effort.
Yeah,
especially after the Robert's this past week for Robert.
So what we'd like to have, ma'am, is every spot from the front all the way around, that it would be possible to put an elevator.
Or pictures, or just a better,
Yes, yes.
We will take photographs of all areas of the outside of the house. And
How about, do we want to see an elevator person?
I don't see how the elevator person does anything except here's the footprint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He can tell you where you could put it.
Well, I think that's more of an architect,
Okay.
wouldn't
Yeah.
it
we're
be?
not architects.
Yeah,
I will definitely get the photographs of all the different angles and things like that. I need to go back and remember having been out there and that sort of thing.
mhm.
I think you will probably find that there is a place you can put it. I mean, we're just being upfront. There is probably alternative places to put it. As was at the last hearing, the discussion came up is, can you put it on the front of the house? I think what we'll probably back to, and I think it's good to get all the photographs, or like y'all to have all the information. But I know based on all the time that Dr. Temple has put into it with meeting with people and all that, I feel like we'll probably be back asking y'all that this is the location that we would like. Now, you all may agree with that, you may not agree with it. But we'll glad to get you the photographs you want, and then it's certainly up to your discretion as to what the board voted.
I would like to understand dimensions to the extent that it falls within a setback. Or it's not of any material concerns in the
Yes, sir.
setback.
Yes, sir. We'll get it.
And I'm really looking for specific arguments why something is marginally feasible or not feasible. Okay? The neighborhood saying it's great here, doesn't much matter. The rest of the neighborhood, it's this guy next door, the person across the street, you know, if they want to weigh in on it, but at
Those
the end of the
two
day.
are most for it.
But so I don't understand if it's positioned in which they can't even see it. What's that all about, especially if it's screened as you've talked. So I'm looking for those specific arguments personally to understand what makes it not feasible.
Well, we'll definitely get photographs of all different sides and.
I would also be glad if anybody wants to come by and look at it, I will give them a tour
Okay.
around the whole
Okay.
house.
Thank you.
I think that would be
And
very helpful.
try to show you.
What if we did
Wow.
that for like 5:15,
That's a great idea.
5
We should
o'clock?
all go
How
see
about
it.
5 o'clock, next meeting day?
April 5th is our
That we
next
meet
meeting.
there.
That sounds like good to me.
And I think we should have refreshments.
That could be.
Just some water, just some water.
And I just have to
Speak for
preface
yourself,
that I
Susan.
think we all want this to work for
Absolutely.
Dr. Temple for obvious reasons. And I feel like Kitty does about that. I think we all might be
Oh, yeah.
there someday. And I can't imagine having that on the front of my house or on the water side.
No.
And if I were a neighbor, I wouldn't want to see it on the water side either. Or the front of the house. So but you also don't want to open Pandora's box. And so, we just don't know how many people it affects. And so that's why we're being so
I might even be able.
cautious about that.
there.
And the other thing,
Um,
Dr. Temple, is too, is that, our job is an advisory board for the Board of Aldermen.
Mhm.
We want the Board of Aldermen, when this goes to them, that we have covered everything for them. We've crossed every T, dotted every I, covered any question they might have, because it makes it easier for you.
I understand that y'all are to protect the citizens of our town. I don't think anybody joins this committee to just merely be obstructive.
Make
I
somebody's
think
life
they
a
really
living.
want to ensure the rights of everybody, so the community is happy and it can be as livable and as pretty and attractive as it can be. One thing that came up
Yeah.
a couple to a word,
Yeah.
did Ms. Capella, did you came up a couple times saying was, let me go over to the front. This, to here is the garage,
Right,
okay? To here is the
the one and
only
only door,
access.
one and only door.
Right.
That's a, if we put it anywhere here, coming out the door, you can't get to the steps
Well, we'll see all that in the tour.
Yeah.
unless you hang it on the front, which takes out this parking.
Right.
So, I mean, those are the things, you have to probably put it anywhere, eliminate a parking space or not have a garage or diminish the usefulness of my only fire escape on the west side.
We'll
So
be
that's
there
why-
at 5
Thank
o'clock.
Thank you, Dr. Temple. Thank you so much.
Real quick,
Okay.
can you reword that for the fire chief to say that he'll sign off on it?
Yep.
Yeah.
If you'll rewrite that little paragraph, that'd be great. Thank you.
So do we vote to table it?
Yeah.
Do we have to do a vote?
Yes,
Okay.
we do. We need
So
to.
I'm gonna make a motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, no,
You
make a
wanna
motion.
call me to make the motion? Just make the
Motion.
glasses, 'cause I can't see. So I'm gonna make a motion that we table, the decision on amendment 155.8.9 to our April the 5th meeting pending. Did we decide we don't need all the houses this could be, but we would like extra pictures or better
Visual,
visuals
Okay.
and, sign off.
And he's gonna
sign off.
Rewrite section
Yep.
5.
Rewrite. Okay.
I second it.
Just one question, the tour, is that part of an official meeting or not? And does that have any notice issues?
I'm probably not gonna
Can
do
we
that. I
just-
can just go on my
Yeah.
own.
Thank you.
I will check on that and give everybody an answer on that. how
Can
should
we do
proceed
it?
with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll check on it with our attorney.
Yeah.
So,
As to whether we can do it? or
If we
whether-
can
Well,
show up and do
As a
it.
group, or
Yeah.
you have to do it individually. So
I
we'll-
just
If
we'll
you
find
show
out.
up as a group, you have to advertise it because it
Yeah,
is
I just
considered
assume go
public.
individually.
Okay,
We're
we can
grown,
go individually.
we're grown people,
Yeah.
we can go. The kitty, I'll give you a ride.
We can go around
Okay,
forum
so
groups.
I made the
we
motion.
made the motion
But
and Kitty
please,
seconded.
It's real important that you go look though.
Yeah.
You really learn a lot when you go there.
Absolutely.
Seeing these
We can
pictures
go in
are
what,
nothing.
groups of 3?
Well, that's not a quorum. I mean.
Yeah, 3.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
As long
So
as
that
long
way
as you don't
somebody-
show up at his house as a quorum, you'll be fine.
Okay. Okay, so,
Okay.
all right,
Stand
so
down the
we're
street
gonna,
and take turns.
Table it till we can all
yeah,
have a chance to do
Mason,
that.
yeah, and we've had
I
a,
made the motion. Kitty
and seconded, so that's
All in
that.
favor? All in
So
favor?
now we're gonna move on to,
All in favor?
oh, all in favor, sorry.
Aye.
Sorry.
Nope, you're fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Temple.
Thank y'all for hearing me.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. So we'll move on to agenda item C. And we will have Tony come up. And you can come up, Tony, and give us a
Okay.
synopsis of agenda item C. That would be great.
Madam Chair, members of the planning board, tonight, we're going to be doing something different that this probably planning board has never done before. This is a request for 619 Wayne Boulevard for a kayak rack and a decking request. This would apply to the S1. The S1 extends on Wayne Boulevard from the Wynn Plaza to Sunset Avenue, all the property to the right on the water. On May 23rd, 2021, the planning and inspection department, we got an application for permission to construct a kayak rack Decking along the bulkhead in the S1 shore zone. Permission from the Board of Aldermen is required for code before any structure may be erected in this S1 district. The Slosh Boat Owners Association agent Karen Dunn has submitted this application and information for the Board of Aldermen to consider the request. This packet of information is included. So this typically would not come to the planning board at all. It would typically go to the Board of Aldermen, because this is what the ordinance says in 155.6511 with the shore zone. So Ms. Dunn did submit this to the last Board of Aldermen meeting. They could have made a decision on this, but they wanted the planning board to look at this and maybe come up with some standards for that S1, but they could have easily made the decision on this. So you look here on page 22, the ordinances that apply to this. You see the, when it went to the last Board of Aldermen, a couple of members said, well, they wanted the planning board to look at this. So Robert did a lot of work on this. And then on page 23, we started looking at this request for this kayak wreck and decking at 619. We started coming up with some standards there. And you see on page 23, we talked about a maximum height of 6 feet. That these racks would have to meet a setback of 7.5 and 15 from the bulkhead. We got a link there with a question mark. We started coming up, well, how many per unit? We put 1. The wood, the material would have to be a wood decking. The width could not be more than 6 feet. And you typically see these anyway from the gates to the waterway there. Setbacks, it would be exempt for the CAMA, something like this. The area would be less than 200 square feet. Gazebos are not allowed in that area. No artificial turf would be allowed, we thought, and CAMA doesn't allow that at all. And attachments, we have the S1 zoning map, proposed site plan supporting the information. And if you notice the date on this application, May 2021. Okay, this is, I've been talking to Carrie for the last 20 years on different projects down there. I think Robert got involved in this, but so it's getting close to a year. It went to the Board of Aldermen a couple times. It was pulled by the town manager or the mayor because of different things. But she was finally get on last month. So she's been trying now for a year. And most people, as you can see on the analysis, you see, if you look on Wayne, you'll see a lot of kayak racks. You'll see all kinds of things in there that individuals have not got permits for. Individuals have just done these. Karen decided to do it the way the ordinance reads here. You bring it to the Board of Aldermen. So she has the application here. The question is can we come up with these standards tonight for the next board meeting? I'm not so sure. There's a lot of activities that are going on in the S1 in the past that we've tried to look at. Just don't have enough staff to look at all the issues of the S1. So this is before you tonight. The question is can we come up with some of these standards? And some of the lots, and I think Robert did a great job with the ownership. Some of the, typically they go with the property across the street. It's not always true. There are a few parcels in the S1 that are owned by not the property across the street. Catholic Church actually sold 2 of theirs to individuals. So you got single ownership, multiple ownerships, you have private clubs, and you have commercial uses there. And I'll try to answer any questions y'all have. So.
Tony, under B, on our zoning districts, S1, under B, it reads, the question shall not be granted by the Board of Aldermen for use of any land or parcel of land for the construction of any type of building or structure, except yours. And
Right.
there are other exceptions. Well, that in itself conflicts what this is. Okay, and then the other thing, and so I didn't have a question, but the other thing is, I was gonna ask if this is the first kayak application, and now I know it is. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's
This is the
correct.
first.
Yes.
Okay, and that, the ordinance that I just read states no structure or building.
Well, it says, if you look at it, it says, unless application has been made to be and permission granted by the town. If you look under A,
Yeah, that doesn't say that under B.
yeah, but I think the intent, I mean, my interpretation of it is that an individual can ask permission from the board. If they get that permission, they can do it. If they don't get permission, then they're not supposed to do it. So that's my interpretation of it.
And this is a special
Yes.
situation. So the ordinance doesn't list kayaks as an exception like it does gazebos.
Yes, and that's,
See, and that's kind of weird. It
well,
seems like it
it's
has
called
to.
this an outdated ordinance. You know, there's so many things now with paddle boards, kayaks. You know, we could say that people store their paddle boards over there, I think, I don't know. But so the ordinance is outdated, and I think that's why you see it like that. But I think they could ask permission. You could say it is a structure of the racks or whatever. Is my opinion.
Or was the intent of this ordinance not to have any structure?
Well, you know, I wasn't,
And to have clean lots with view?
yep, and I don't know the answer to that.
Tony, I read somewhere and I couldn't find it again. I asked Robert about it, I believe. Maybe I asked you as well. It said the intention in yielding that property that was created over to the homeowners was to maintain the vista. Now, you know, you can get into a whole sort of
Right.
dance, what does that mean? But clearly, if you drive that linear footage, there's great vista. There's lots of vista, and then there's some not vista that has happened. So I think it's kind of fundamental in addressing some of this stuff as to, is that a driver or is that not a driver? Because it talks to things like how high you put stuff, you know, that 3-foot fence thing, that makes a lot of sense relative to a vista. When you start talking about 6 foot now, you know, that's taller. Then you got, you know, flag poles, or you got people have put landscaping in to hide stuff they've actually built. You can
That's
see
true.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So where does this go? So
Exactly.
is the
The
driver here
three-foot
vista?
Tells you.
And I mean, that gives us a lot of guidance as to how to play this. Then you see some of these racks that they're about this high off the ground. I guess they're almost within the 3-foot fence kind of thing. So, you know, I think we need some guidance here.
The one next door to the homeowners that are here tonight. It's, as you're looking at the water on the left.
6.
I walked over into that property this afternoon. I went over there and looked at that one, but, and that looks like it's 7.
Oh.
No, excuse me, it looks like it's 6 feet high.
The kayak racks.
The kayak racks.
Yeah.
The actual post from the ground to the top of the post. When I stood up to it, I'm 5 feet. It looks about a foot taller than I am, so about 6. And that's really large.
Yeah.
Well, didn't you have that on here?
Well, I think we put a.
Height limit of 6 feet.
6 feet.
And I think what she's saying, we think
But it's
6
too
feet.
tall.
That's
Yeah.
too tall.
Okay.
This was to start conversation.
Right,
is what
right,
this-
exactly. Yeah.
There was one other-
Well, I think the problem is if it's owned by numerous people, then they all want to be
A
able to
spot to
have
put
their,
the rug.
and if we're saying you can just have one rack, then that limits.
Well, maybe we could
Probably
say you
two.
could have 2 racks bumped up like this, you know,
So
Like
I think
this, like
that's-
this.
yeah, like this,
Yeah,
like this,
and-
kitty, you know, like a 2 rack and a 2 rack, like a shoe rack in your closet, you just do, you know, side by side.
And
Something
I
like that.
understand what you're saying, and okay, I hate to keep interrupting, but if you'll go to the house, the property next to theirs, it is only 1 rack,
Yeah, I saw
but it's
some
a
of the,
double.
yeah,
I mean, you could have a triple.
yeah.
Mhm.
I saw
So one
some,
rack and it
as-
can go on and on.
As
and
long
on.
as it's no taller
Yeah.
than 3 feet.
I saw
Right.
some that
Yeah.
were very, I saw some.
Well, that's where I guess
live
the
in that
length
area.
would come into play, that he'd limit,
Mhm.
but Tony said a length.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
The
think
length
6
of
feet
that
is
would
way too
look like
tall.
It's about 9 feet. I'm just estimating that.
Mhm.
You probably know better than I did. Did it look like it's about 9 feet long? The one next door to you?
Well, if you,
Uh-huh.
But Tony, I struggle with
Big.
riding
It's
them
really
down.
wide.
It's tall and
The-
long.
Fences weren't 3 feet, they were 4 feet.
Typically, hopefully we.
Somebody's got a putting green with artificial turf. You know, there's no consistency. Then you got all the yacht clubs and their sailboats So if you're talking about Vista, I'm like, how is it fair to these people not to be able to put something in front of their house if that's what they choose to,
So
when you've
one of
got all these hotels with sailboats and,
So one of the things that was happening at the last Board of Alderman meeting,
There's an exception for
Was-
commercial.
yeah, I know, but
there were two things that were happening on this agenda item at the Board of Alderman meeting from my perspective. And I validated it by rewatching the meeting and
Uh-huh.
also by speaking with several of the aldermen. The one is the due diligence that's been done for this particular request. The other thing is that S1 is a mess and they know it and they are very frustrated with that fact. And what they verified to me was that they wanted us to consider the S1, but not necessarily tonight. We have a kayak rack or a paddleboard rack to sort through. But they're connected. They're connected if, like I said, if this is a Vista thing, then we're dealing with a 3-foot high thing. We're not dealing with a 6-foot, so to speak. But they want us, and I would suggest that we don't get into the soupy mess of the S1 tonight, but try to figure out how can we deal with this
right.
specific one request.
I agree.
Because-
But we have to
Yeah.
make some
Because we could be here
assumptions.
all night.
That's right, because he's got a lot of things here to consider.
Right.
Yeah,
And they're all good. They're everyone good. And it would help clean that. That's one. The biggest thing is people, it has one have just done it.
It's illegal.
Yeah.
So
They
the
never asked
attorney would have to
permission.
go back and.
Remember when
get-
they used to park out there in front of Jim Burns's house? I mean, it's like 6 cars out there.
Or you would have to go back and find them
Yeah.
or.
but they still park, there's still an area down at the very end that people park.
We have there's 3 or 4 places that individuals can legally park on Wayne,
Yeah.
like 3 or 4 locations.
On in the S1?
Yes,
Okay, so that was in front of Summer Sands.
well, you got,
The
There was a-
owner.
They were like little parking
well, we
spots.
got Wind Plaza, the place beside it, and another place. Those are old commercial places that have been here.
Okay,
The grandfather.
So-
Grandfather Blockade
Okay.
Runner is another one.
Yeah.
There used to be, and y'all may know, there was a commercial fishing boat a long, long time ago.
okay.
So they let Blockade Runner do it. And Jim Burns' property was talked about. I can't remember what was discussed when there was attorneys
It was a
looking at
mess.
that. So I'm not sure what
Okay.
happened there.
But it also talks a commercial entity can't change what it's doing. So if it's not a fishing boat, so why is it still a parking lot? I mean, there's lots of things that are really messy about this whole ordinance.
Right. But we're here tonight to talk about like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
kayak, right?
Yeah.
So we want to
Issues
get,
that-
We agree, we can try to just keep.
Yeah, let's-
like, that's one is something
Yeah.
that, yeah, that we need to put on our list of stuff to do.
I
And it
agree.
is, and it's, like you said, there's no way that we could come up with standards tonight for that S1 that needs to be done. So,
Okay.
The problem I see with making these 3 feet as opposed to 6 feet, and if you're looking at benefiting the owners and them having, kayak storage out there, is it's got to be 15 feet from the bulkhead. So those areas aren't that wide, wide from, or deep, I guess I should say.
Some
So
are deeper than others.
so that might be an issue with making them 3 feet and people having 2 of them, because then they don't meet the 15-foot setback from the bulkhead. If that makes sense.
Well,
But if
you
we-
wouldn't be able to stack them like that. You'd have to do them like this.
Right,
Most of those properties are 50 by 50. I mean, I'm just saying that generally.
yeah,
So if you look at the sizes,
Right.
And what?
I did break it down for what it's worth. There's 35 between 1,000 and 2,000, and there's 35 between 2,000 and 3,000. There's only 5 that are less than 1,000
Square footage.
square foot.
Okay.
And then there's going up to above 3,000, above 5,000, and above 10,000. That's just a total of 8. So the core of this that we're dealing with is 35 and 35 between 2,000 and 3,000.
Mhm.
But some
So
people,
that satisfies the huge percentage of the
Mhm.
properties, to, I think, Susan's point.
but
Yeah.
some of them, like, for example, my neighbors, we have a long stretch. So I don't want to say share, but my neighbors to the right of me, we all kind of allow each of us to use, because it goes I'm 4, 202, 204. There's a big gap because It was Bill Bradshaw that bought the church property
Right.
when it was sold, and then the neighbors jumped in because they didn't want anything built there. That's a whole nother story. But I'm saying some of these yards look longer than they are, especially when you get around the Catholic Church, and I happen to know what all that's about. It looks, and it's longer, but it's actually 5 owners, but every 4 owners, 5 owners, but they kind of share and make it one big yard. So I don't know how you,
Which is what this other thing does. Y'all do that too, with sharing.
I did that based off Robert's.
But you want to put your
Mm.
kayak, it's like 4 families or something in on that.
Well, it's 7 owners, and I do have a PowerPoint
Yeah,
when you're
okay.
ready.
Okay, yeah.
But
Quick
before we
question.
get to that, there's a couple fundamental things to, I think, to hear back from Tony or so. Sorry, I didn't interrupt.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna ask Tony, is there a reason why you did side setbacks at 7.5 feet?
Well, that's typically, and we don't have to do that because Robert and I talked about it. The question is, are we gonna get a better product if we let them go closer there, because you're not gonna build a house?
Well, that's what I was, most of them were to the edge of that property
And
line.
that's the thing. Could we, but typically it's a setback, and I think that's why we did it 7.5. But then you're pushing it more in. Would
I'd
it be-
almost rather it be in the setback.
I think we could, I think you could reduce that
3 feet. or
3 feet,
something.
4 feet, or whatever you wanted to.
Okay.
And, but I think eventually, we may have to do, once we really get into this thing in the next few months, to start looking at
Mhm, right.
text amendments and things like that to make it really happen like
I
that.
just think,
But I
God,
think
I'd
you
almost
would get a
rather it
better
in the
product.
setback where you don't have it in your vista view. Yeah. You know,
So
kind of-
if the next door neighbor would do the same thing, push them like this, you got it there instead of
Just one spot.
in one spot
Yeah.
there.
So what
Yeah.
happens to?
But in their
Robert had it.
situation, they've got shrubs that are almost 7.5 feet, aren't they? Yeah, almost, they have shrubs
Yeah, I've been-
beside their fence that are almost 7.5 feet, so then we're gonna put it.
Next to the shrubs.
Mhm.
So I've been scouring the UDO for vistas, because everybody's been bringing that up for the last couple of days. And there's only a single mention of vistas in the entire document, that is our land development code. And it only applies to commercial mixed use, which the S1 is not.
Wow.
So I just want to put that out there.
That's important.
Would
That
you
is
repeat-
very
would you repeat
important.
that? I'm sorry.
I said that the only mention of protecting vistas, views, vegetation, circulation of traffic, and all that, the only mention of vista in the entire land use document only pertains to commercial mixed use, and that is not the S1 district.
Wow.
So just, everyone's been asking me about that, and I've come back with my answer.
There it is.
And Tony, real
And
quick,
and Kama doesn't have an opinion on that?
No,
what's the 1 per unit? Like
Well,
1 rack per lot, 1 rack?
Well, let's say if you had a duplex, some of those houses are duplex, so you would let 1 and 1.
Okay,
2.
okay, just making sure.
If you had, there are triplexes down there, quadruplexes.
So how would we handle,
I think when Karen gets something, we can look at her situation.
Okay.
And figure out if that works for them, somehow. So,
okay,
Let's give her a break. Go get her up here quick, because I know she's ready.
First of all, I just want to say that I appreciate you going through the correct format to do it, and
For doing the right thing.
yeah,
I know.
here you are a year later.
Well, just kind of goes with the. So first of all, I want to say there's one of the most important thing to anyone who drives down Wainick, lives on Wainick, is the
That's
vista.
right.
Yeah.
And I'm all over that. That was one of the reasons why we have given you the site plan that we had. First of all, Karen Dunn,
Yes.
622 Wainick Boulevard, Wrightsville Beach. And I am one of 7 property owners of the Schloss Boat Owners Association. Let's see, just, which one, the red one?
you know, right, there you go.
The right one,
Middle,
oh,
yeah.
is it ready to go?
hold on. Sorry, that's one. All right, we're just gonna we're just gonna stop sharing.
Okay.
Should be good now.
So this is the property at 619 Waynick Boulevard. This is one of those unique tracts that is not owned by the property across the street. It is owned by 7 property owners. The Schloss Estates Boat Owners Association was created in 1980. I think you've got all of this information. We still have 2 of the original property owners that are still boat owners. And we are coming before you today because the UDO says that's what we need to do in order to have kayak rafts or any structure. This is the location. You know it well, Ms. Collins. It is at the corner basically of, not quite, Iula, just south of Iula and Waynick. And I don't have to go over the S1 zone again. I think you're all pretty familiar with it at this point. But again, in that regulation says we need to come before the Board of Aldermen for permission to do it. So this is a little bit of a blow up of what we're asking. I have spoken with Catherine Elks with CAMA, and their requirements are less 200 feet or less, no greater than 200 square feet. And what we're proposing, when I originally spoke with Robert about this last April, he said that anything would have to meet the 7.5 foot setback, and that included the deck. So that's how I've drawn this up. There's also, when I spoke with Catherine Elks, there's a 30-foot area of environmental concern, or the AEC line. And so I have those kayak racks at about 30 feet from, at this case, the bulkhead is the mean high water mark. So I think you'll find that to be true probably any locale that has a bulkhead. But anyway, these are examples of some of the kayak racks that are on Waynick Boulevard at this time. And from what I've seen, I think these are very low profile. They really don't block your view, especially as you've all been talking about putting them one behind the other. And that's exactly what we're proposing. There's a lot of young children now, as grandchildren and children of our members. They like to use the lawn area to play in. So we're trying to preserve as much of that as possible. So this is the type that we're proposing. Those are 8 by 8 foot, 8 by 8 inch posts that would probably go down 2 feet into the ground. So they would be maybe 6 feet tall at most. That way you would get maybe 4 partitions. And you'd also be able to have it up off the ground enough so that you could maintain it and you wouldn't have unruly vegetation. So some additional examples of wooden decks. And again, CAMA has approved these as within the AEC they allow. They don't really consider these impervious because they're slatted wooden decks. So that would come under pervious. They don't want any kind of stones. They don't want any kind of pavement. But the wood slatted decks complies with their regulations. So this is my example of what the area would be for what we are proposing, less than 200 square feet. I think it came out as 196 or 194. And then this is the location, these buckets were the best I could do, of where they would be situated. And that is with that 7.5 foot side setback. We're happy to move it closer if that's something this board would like to recommend. And so, you know, you've got a perspective here, but all of those
Because the
lines.
tarp represents the deck.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep,
And so are the shrubs not yours?
they're not ours. No,
I
and
was
in
hoping that
fact,
was just 7.5 feet.
no, we've had to chop them down because they were probably 3 feet into our property. So we have been working on that since May. Getting it prepared. Yeah, so that's basically the property line where those shrubs are, and we've got our landscaper now just trimming them up because they're really coming over into our property. Okay, so again, I've had it reviewed by CAMA back in August. There's a letter, I think, in your packet with their description of what they permit, and because this really runs into their regulation as well, but CAMA gives the town the ability and allows them to issue the permits for the state. So I did want to make sure that they were okay with it. And I think that's about it. If you have any other questions.
So can we tonight tell her that she doesn't have to do the 7.5, she can do 3 feet? That's.
I think we could do this. I think we could make a recommendation of 7.5 feet. Staff will continue to look at this and see if there's anything that it has to be 7.5 feet. If not, I think it could be reduced. So I think we go forward with it 7.5 feet. If whatever recommendation no one likes to make, so.
Yeah, because I just think I'd rather have it in 7.5 feet where it's,
Mhm.
you know, that cleared rather than stuff stuck out in front.
I agree.
Yeah, from a
Yeah,
footprint point of view, one of those racks would be about 24 square feet. So 2 of them would be 48.
Yeah, we need to
Regardless of
know
when
the
they start.
exact measurements
So
of what
they-
you were thinking.
Yeah, so they
The
are,
width and the height and the length
yeah, so what, of the boats or the,
of the
Right.
racks.
so the racks are, what did we have them, 6 feet apart, right?
6 feet apart.
We have them 6 feet apart, 6 feet tall, and then it's 18-inch arms.
Are you gonna have arms on both sides?
I think we're gonna have maybe paddle boards on the back side that would be like pegs that would.
Right.
Sticking out.
But you would have them on the front and
Kayaks.
the back side. Yeah,
You mean the paddleboard standing upright or,
they'd lay,
No, they would be like if
right?
okay,
on edge like that,
okay.
instead of out like
Right,
that.
got it.
So that would be
Oh,
even
okay.
more,
That's good.
Wouldn't stick out as far.
less
So the
profile.
examples of the pictures you have, that's not what you're gonna have.
Those are,
One of them did show it kind of what she said, I think.
Well, let me get back to those pictures. Yeah, so there they are. So most of our members have kayaks. Some members do have paddle boards, so there may be some paddle boards that would be there. On the back side or closest to those shrubs, that's where we were talking about maybe having something that would attach a paddle board, like just flush to it. rather than on an angle.
If it kind
So,
of
so
drives-
really, you don't know your footprint,
Well, so if,
because we need to know.
well, the footprint is, I guess if you were to turn it into a box,
Mhm.
it would be 6 foot tall by 6 feet long,
3-foot bars.
and then how long are the bars? 3 feet? Oh, okay, 3 feet. So
And then
let's-
your post at 8 inches, so 3 feet, 8 inches. Yeah,
Yeah,
Mhm.
and most kayaks are how wide?
So
I mean, it might
kayak-
hang over the bars a little bit, but it's not gonna hang over a lot.
They're
no,
like 42 and a little bit less wide kayaks,
yeah,
They're
my
how
wide
wide?
is,
42,
They're almost 4 feet.
oh, wide,
Right,
Yeah.
right, 42 inches.
42 inches.
my widest one is about
48 is 4
And
feet.
less, yes.
36.
Mhm.
That's a double, actually, it's a triple.
I'm talking about width, not length.
I'm talking about with,
Okay,
so lengthwise on kayaks, 6 to 16 feet. They have a little midgets and they have the big long ones, but.
So they're
So
gonna,
when
they're gonna
you
hang
think
off
about-
these racks along.
Yeah, well, you
Yeah,
can see in the
yeah.
picture there,
Yeah.
there's a good example of a small one and a large one kayak there.
Yeah.
So when we talk about footprint, you're really talking about, what is this mass?
It is.
And if you start putting stuff on the back and now you have a wall, especially if they're this way,
Yeah.
not this way, it changes the game.
Yeah.
And if you look at some of these, because it's not
Yeah.
just this decision for this one spot, there's piles of stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
where they don't have a rack, but they just somehow have all this. So there's really no limitation on how many kayaks or boards you might actually put on the property.
Well, some of them
Versus
don't even
racks.
have them. They just have them laying out
Just
there in
have
the
laying
yard.
around, I agree.
Right.
And some of them wind up being stored there
boats and stuff.
permanently in boats or whatever.
Yeah.
We won't have any way to overlook this from now on. We approve what we approve, and then that's,
There's a morph.
yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Well-
like the deck. I think that's right. And people are using it and it's neat, and I don't see any reason why we can't have a pervious surface. And it's already approved, the 200 square feet.
Well, that's what CAMA allows.
Right. Mhm. I
So
don't
your
know why we
deck is
can't
just
approve
gonna go
that.
the one way, it's not gonna go like a T.
No,
Okay.
Were you gonna change that walkway that you have here?
no,
Tony, I struggle with
let me go back.
the 7.5 feet. I almost think any structure needs to be in that 7.5.
Yeah, and I think it can, so I think we can move forward if you make a recommendation, I think.
I was just, that to me, like if you're taking away somebody's vista, you don't want anything in that,
You wanna keep.
you want it in the setback so that it's not blocking somebody's view.
To me, what's the difference in the kayak rack versus this giant bush that you can't even see through?
I completely
I'd rather
agree.
have a kayak.
Yeah, me too. But I think
Well-
that's stuff we can clean up down the road, but I like
Well-
it better in the 7.5 feet than,
Oh, I do
Yeah.
too,
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
think we're.
but I agree
agreeing
with
on
you.
I mean,
that. But do we want kayak racks all the way down, up and down Wayne? Is
I
that
feel
what we
like they're
want?
already there.
They're already there.
Really, they're not.
No,
It's,
just,
we're talking about 7 situations,
yeah. I mean,
not 75.
There's, out of all those lots, only 34 of them had some, what I would see as a violation, and they weren't all racks. They were concrete and other types of things installed, so I think you're right. But what's the unintended consequence if all we say is, okay, you can have a rack, but we don't specify some sense of footprint?
Oh, I agree.
Because next thing
Yeah, I
you know,
think
you
that-
have a
yeah.
multi-headed creature here that's got all sorts of stuff hanging on it, including for people who have small sailboats, they put their rigging in these pipes. You see that especially down the block there, Hanover and of course over at CYC. And next thing you know, this rack has become a lot of other things, and we probably have to address that.
No, I think we
Otherwise, we're
definitely, but I think we
prejudiced
need to have a footprint for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like, I remember when I complained about people parking their boats in their yards. And I was told that this is a boating community. And, you know, that's never gonna change. Or a boat in your driveway, you know, I mean, it's a boat. I don't care about it in your driveway, but when you park it in your front yard for everybody to see, that's, I mean, it's kind of trashy, but whatever. But I mean, I was told that it's a boating community and that's the way it is. So what's the difference in having small kayaks
Well, I think we
for
can
an
make,
intended
Yeah.
purpose? I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate, so thinking out loud. But I do think there needs to be, you know, if this is approved, then there needs to be guidelines set and followed.
Size wise.
Size, and
Mhm.
also, you know,
Location.
does it need to be, I mean, I wouldn't want to see it sitting in the
Mm-mm.
center of,
Mm-mm.
it
so,
has to be the same for everyone.
right, yeah,
So one of the camera regulations is that it can't be in the AEC. So already
right.
it's set back at least 30 feet
Mm-hmm.
from the high water mark. So that's at least giving you that 30 feet from the high water
Mhm.
mark to landward. And that's what we've proposed. So you were asking the footprint, I guess if you were to take it 6 feet out by 3.5, it's about 21 square feet footprint
For one.
for one.
Mhm.
For one stand, you mean? one-
Yeah.
But the
yeah,
boat would
it's
actually
48
take up
inches
more than
instead.
that.
Now, the decking can come all the way out. It doesn't have to have the 30 feet.
The decking can be in the AEC,
It can be beside the bulkhead.
but it can't be what, greater than 6 inches or?
You know, 6 inches, but typically on Wayne, their small walkway that you see, CAMA allows a 6-foot walkway that's not counted into the 200 square feet. So typically on Wayne, and if some of your houses, they're 6 feet wide, drip through decking is what you see.
Okay.
So that'd be
And they're exempt,
Yeah, they're not even counted in the 200 square feet.
so you could have it
But
in.
not
So
the-
just
you could have the
on
walkway
pavers,
too if you wanted.
Yeah, well, that's suiting us just fine.
It's still good wood.
Yeah.
So it works.
What you really need is tonight is guidance on your kayak stand.
I would
Well-
love your recommendation for approval of our permit to go forward. That's really what we need.
So the only thing I'm confused about is the Board of Aldermen wanted us to figure out like regulations, right? So I feel like we can't approve it until we figured out the regulations.
Yeah, we have to.
Yeah, that's the thing is.
Yeah.
I think they wanted us to look at some standards.
I wish we had had
And
this
it's
like
gonna take,
last month.
it's gonna take some time to come up with standards. Maybe.
Yeah, are we gonna hold
So-
her, that's my question, and hers. Are we holding her up now until we do page 23?
Yeah, in other words, if you don't make any recommendation and you want to keep studying this, I don't think she can move forward. I mean, she could take it to the Board of Aldermen, but they may say, well, let's wait till the planning board does their study, but this is gonna take more than 1 or 2 meetings.
What do you mean by
Could
study?
we split this?
Well,
Could she do her decking?
Why can't she, I mean, we split it up so she can go ahead and get her decking, because that's gonna be a project. in
Well, I think
itself.
her camera permit is for
That's allowed.
decking and for the racks.
And the racks.
What she's proposing is 2 low-profile kayak racks and the decking, and that's it, in that S1.
Right.
And that's what the camera permit's for.
Mhm.
But as far as standards, I don't think we can do justice tonight, come up with standards, because I think this is gonna take.
Yeah, we would be here
Couple
till
more
10
times.
So
o'clock.
what do you think is missing from the stand? I mean.
Well, I mean, just, there's no length here, there's no,
Measurements.
yeah,
There's
height
a
of 6
footprint,
feet. I mean, we
right.
can say, okay, we agree on the
Well,
height
we
of
can make
6 feet.
recommendations on some basis. What else are we gonna research? Where will we find?
See, I thought we could
Federations
go
that
ahead
we
and
have
send
now.
hers, but it doesn't sound like you really could because you need a basis of, it can't be but this tall, this wide, this
Right.
long. And
I mean, if we can say right now what we think that should be, then I think we could send her
I
on.
think there's 3 aspects to this. One is height. And
Right.
I'm perplexed as to how we go about that, because then
And the
this is probably gonna be, until some architect figures out something else, the tallest thing that's gonna be built. If I look, this is the tallest stuff that you see. The other aspect is how many of them, and given the variety of plots, you know, we can probably ballpark that. It seems like, let's say 2 racks, just for argument's sake, 2 racks is fine across
But
the
the 2
space.
racks could be any size. So,
But a
so it would have
footprint-
to be a
A
footprint.
footprint times 2.
Yeah.
Or
And-
just a
and
total
specify
footprint
a
regardless
height.
of the number.
I have this big
Doesn't matter
question.
how many.
What do the aldermen feel that they want the end result to be? And are they up to controlling it? Because the tallest things around have been some of the plantings, the artificial plantings.
I was
put in
gonna say,
place.
the,
And if, you know, it's a moot point if we're saying you gotta hold this to 6, and, you know, you got these other giraffes walking
And
around.
the fence is
for
3.
being planted.
I think
And look
6,
at
I
that.
think 6 is way too high.
If you just look at
But it
that one
says
picture,
36.
see that one picture?
Yeah.
Tony, what does the
That's
board
what most of
alderman
these-
want us to come back with?
You know, I think they wanted to,
What our recommendation on what we think she should,
I think they wanted
So-
two things. I think they wanted some standards, a standardized, come up with some standard.
For that whole area.
The question is when we had the meeting, I thought they said that, you know, that she would come back to the next board meeting. And I wanted to say, well, it's gonna take a lot of work in one meeting to come up with. You know, if we make a recommendation to move this to the Board of Aldermen, we could say that we've approved it as her narrative says, and limit to 6 feet tall. But what happens next month if we start looking at this going, well, 6 feet is too tall, we need to go to 4 feet. That makes it non-conforming. And then what are we gonna do with, what kind of direction are we gonna get with the other things that are out there?
That's what I'm
Okay,
trying to
it's gonna
ask
have
you.
to
What are we gonna do
address
about the other ones?
And that's a big mess, because we tried this about 10 years ago, and we got to these commercial places and yacht clubs, and it just become a big mess. So, you know, it's gonna take some more meetings, I think, to figure out some stuff here, so.
We could say to them that here's the base case, but here's some concerns we have on, let's say, height.
Yeah.
6 foot seems reasonable if you accept that height is okay for that
Right.
space.
I mean, they can make that decision.
Yeah, but otherwise, then you have to, you know, reduce the height and.
And they very.
And they may,
Some foot-
they may not like what we decide anyway.
Yeah.
But they don't
And
have
change
as
it.
much information as we have in front of us now. They didn't have any sense of how many properties, the complexities of ownerships and desires, but apparently there's so many that don't have any. I guess there's not as much of a desire as you said, Susan. There's like 7, right? You said 7.
That's not many.
Yeah, so there's other things, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
but if we're talking about kayaks,
Just
racks,
kayaks.
and if they want us to make a statement and what do you call it? Not a principle, but
recommendation?
a plan, no,
Yeah.
a plan for that.
Yeah.
Then for only kayaks, then that's what we need to do.
I think they probably want more than just kayaks.
Yeah.
well.
But I just-
Well, but for her, that's all they need.
Right, but for now, we can do that. We
To
can
help
say max
Yes.
height 6 feet to help her get to the,
Yes, but then we also had the 7.5 foot thing, so that we. they get
Well, that was
better-
just staff's recommendation.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So that was just staff. So I think we could
make a recommendation that it doesn't have to be 7.5
That
feet.
could be
Put them
like
out there
3.
more at the perimeter.
I
Yeah,
think it needs to stay in the 7.5 feet. I
Yeah.
don't think it needs to come out of it.
Yeah.
To not block anybody's view of their house, because their house is gonna be set in that 7
Oh, I
feet.
think you're right.
Yeah.
okay,
But
so,
I
7.5
that's
is
right.
even very liberal considering what the demand would
Yes, it
actually
is.
be for this
Right.
space.
so, do we want to close this portion of the meeting? And then if we have a question for Karen, come back to Karen? Does that sound, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
I don't think so. Can you think of anything, Dale?
Matt,
Yes, if you just state your name and,
my name is Dale Smith. I'm a resident of Wrightsville Beach, Wayne Boulevard,
Mhm.
and I am I oversee security and maintenance of the Schloss Boat Owners Association dock, okay? We didn't put kayak racks on the backside of it because that would intrude into the 7.5 foot, okay? I will say this, if you allow us to move closer to the line, especially with the shrubbery that's there, it's like the kayak racks will disappear, okay? We also needed, we needed 8 slots. We have 7 owners, 7 slips. And we worked on the fact that most of the boats, most of the kayaks are 12 to 14 feet long, okay? And if an owner has a touring kayak, a long one, they're gonna have to do something else with it, okay? Also, Karen's idea and mine to stand paddle boards on edge behind it was just as long as we didn't intrude into the 7.5 foot space, okay? But also for security purposes, I like to see the posts at 7 feet, honestly. That allows me to put some cabling in there to secure the boats. We've had a couple of issues over the years where a kayak's been stolen, okay? And
We cable ours.
one that attempted, so I'd like a little bit extra room to, and the shrubbery that's there is 8 feet, if it's a foot, the birdhouse that you see in the one photo, it's not this one, but I can't reach it, so it's at least 8 feet. So what did I miss?
Could you take it, would it work to keep it in that 7.5 feet? To not stick
There's still
out
time
in,
at the setback.
yeah.
Not have set, oh yeah, it worked just fine.
Absolutely.
Well, so when you say you want at least 7 feet, that's so you lock it.
He's talking about the
Height,
height
right,
of the
okay.
8 by 8.
Pardon me,
Yeah.
excuse me.
No,
Talking
I,
about the post.
I apologize.
And I want to say one other thing about the height of those posts that are 8 inches by 8 inches. There's not a lot of people that can put a 40-pound boat over their head. And so I don't think you're gonna be getting boats at 7 feet or 6 feet as I go through
He wanted his
this.
post at 7 feet.
The height of
Right,
the
the
post.
height of the post,
Yes.
excuse me.
You know, you might be able to get a paddle board up at that top
Yeah,
spot.
it's not reasonable, it's not practical to go higher than that, I just want to have room for a cable. And by the way, Neil had asked about the length or the width of the kayaks. Keep in mind that those, the brackets are at an angle. Footprint wise, they're only covering 3 feet, lengthwise, they're closer to 42 inches after you get the angle in there, okay? And one last thing regarding the vista, have y'all ever been out there at sunset? They're more rooftop sitters. I've seen more backsides and.
Have you ever?
Yeah.
Where did
It's
this,
the latest
it's
thing.
the latest
Park
thing,
their cars
last
there
year,
and
you get on the roof of your
roof.
car?
are you kidding?
And have like
It's,
cocktails.
Aren't they cute? Aren't
Or-
they just cute?
Well,
They're so young and so cute.
When I was 21, it might have probably was something I'd be cracking a beer out there too, but that's not the case anymore. So the Vista thing is kind of,
The children on the top of
Yeah,
the,
I
that's
get
the
it. I'm a
thing.
little slow. I'm just like, what are they talking about?
I know too.
It just started like last year.
Well,
year
I
before.
appreciate what you're saying. Kelly.
Yeah.
thank you. Any question?
Yeah, I do have a question. You were describing basically having it on both sides.
No, just one side. We didn't want to get into the 7.5 foot easement.
So instead of having two,
We'd have two.
you could, if you went with 2 posts, have it come out both sides. If you could work with the, if you could work with the setback, within the setback.
Yeah, it would, that would really become more of a structure then. If
Be hard to get it
we
out.
had 8 kayaks on it, then that really becomes, all of a sudden, it's a 6 feet
Like dry
long
storage.
and
It'd
it's
be
now,
hard to get
it's
it
now,
out.
Yeah.
6
It's
feet,
more-
7 feet out.
I think it's more obtrusive to have it coming out on both.
You should go and look, you all should go and look at the next one.
Yeah, it's massive.
I saw it.
It is the
Right.
most unattractive, it's not what we want.
Okay, so you're only talking about doing those rods on the one
On
side,
one side.
so it'd be one dimensional pretty, no, so there won't be, you're talking about maybe a flat on the back side.
Right.
But that's okay, it's different. I was thinking we're gonna have posts out both sides. No,
No.
okay.
just like you see here in this picture, these pictures. It's
So
just out the one side.
If we took a width of, with a kayak on it, how wide do you think would be from the back of that post to the outside of that kayak?
3.5 feet.
Okay. And you're saying with the 12 to 14 inch,
14 foot.
14 feet length of the
kayaks
boat.
would,
Okay.
Some of our members have 12-foot kayaks sit on tops, others have 14-footers.
I think 14 is the longest. I mean, you might, and I'm gonna go beyond what we have at Schloss. A sea kayak is gonna be 18 feet max, and they're gonna be real narrow. So they're gonna be probably a 24, 28 inch beam and probably an 18-foot length.
Our owners, though, are all powerboat people. They're not out there, pushing.
Well, your
17
racks are
feet.
smaller than your boats and than your
Sure.
kayaks, yeah.
Yeah, we figured 6 feet apart would even hold a 12-footer or even a 9-footer.
Are
Some
you
of
going
these
to
are
regulate how big a larger kayak they can have?
No. I mean, how it is at 6 feet, any size would be able to fit.
The racks themselves will regulate what people put up there. The way we have them in line, they're gonna figure out real quick, they can't put a 17-foot kayak up there, okay?
It'll
Put
above
the
the
other
next,
rack.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you can't fit a 5-foot between, so it's just small, so,
Mhm.
But how many paddle boards were you thinking you can fit on the backside?
Probably 2,
Vertically?
because they're gonna be. I don't know, what's
Yeah.
the width of
So you're
those?
talking about a capacity of 4 things on that one and 4 things on that one, and then, so to speak, 2 each on that, so that's 8, that's
It's
10,
not as tall,
that's 12.
but it is.
12 items is what you're talking about. trying to
Where's
store.
8, 9, 10? I
Well,
mean, at
yeah,
max, I mean,
6 feet.
No, that-
I'm
That's
probably the
not
only one at
bad.
this point that even has a paddle. But not to say that
I got
people
one next door.
won't get them if they are accessible.
But this started out looking for 8, I think, to configure 8 things, where you have 8 owners. Was it 8
Yeah, we
owners,
have
7
7
owners?
on.
Kind of a
Seven
thing. So
owners.
it's, how do we say, okay, enough's enough, because you multiply this up and down the boulevard and.
The
If you-
paddleboard
if you
thing
have-
doesn't have to happen for us. We just wanted to put the kayaks up there. We have several members that have kayaks or their kids or their grandchildren, okay?
And that's what's heavy, and that's what's hard to
Mhm.
Just
travel
across the
with.
street.
But this one has 3, I don't know where this one was.
That
I
could
think it
have
was
4.
that one.
That could have 4,
right
there's a bar
It's
above
on
it,
the one on the right.
One on the right.
but it's not completely filled, there's an extra, there's one more level that it can go up.
One more spot up top.
Where
Yeah,
is
trying
that
to get
one?
across Wayne in the summertime.
It is.
Are you proposing 2 racks then,
Yes.
Back to back.
Yes.
It's on the
Yeah.
right, but-
pointed towards the sound? Not
Parallel.
side, not sideways, but
Parallel
like this.
with the side yard.
Property.
Yes, parallel
Mhm.
with the side yard.
And are you talking about 4 like that?
Right, yes.
But they're not using the top, so how tall do you think that is, then do you think that's 7 feet
I think
or
that's
6?
close to 7 feet.
Maybe.
I, of course, couldn't go on
Of course, we
the
don't know.
property, but
If you look at the lowest bar, I mean, there's space under there that it could be lower. It doesn't have to be 7 feet.
Right.
tall.
well, you
That's a lot
gotta
of space,
maintain
yeah.
it too. You
We
have
want
to
to make sure
mow
we
it.
can mow the grass.
Once you move
Yeah.
the grass.
Tony, it's allowable to put some sort of rock there that would.
Typically, you don't want to, but like they say, they want it for maintenance and for ease of getting them out, but not putting them so low and things like that, so.
Talking about rock in the footprint instead of grass.
Typically, you don't,
Instead of
Kevin
grass.
doesn't want anything in that 30 foot at all.
They specifically
Drip through decking.
exclude rock.
Yes.
Rock.
Yeah.
Hammond does.
No, they- Gravel, isn't it?
Do what now?
They don't
Gravel.
allow rock or gravel in the AEC.
Not at all. Not supposed to, but you'll see.
I was gonna say there's a few more just.
Don't even
The
go
list of
there.
violations there.
Okay, so What do you guys think? Or does anybody else have any questions? Should we?
Tony, can we send them back to the board?
I think you can. I think you can make a recommendation. Now, whether they hear it or not, we can say, we're gonna have to work on this, and we are.
Mhm.
But we recommend that they be allowed to do this with the deck like this and the height, what we
Mhm.
think,
They're asking for 2 racks,
right?
and one of the things I don't think we've come up with is height yet. We talked about 6 feet posts, 7 feet posts, so we gotta make a decision on that, whether you want 6-foot posts, 7-foot posts, or you want them lower. So.
Well, honestly, I think I would rather see the top of the post a little bit higher if it's maintained, if the yard's maintained underneath. It doesn't mean the kayak's gonna be up at 7 feet, because nobody, I have them butting my house and I'm pretty strong. I work out every day. Like, I can't lift that paddleboard up, and they're lighter than kayaks.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the request for 7 feet was relative to securing it somehow.
right.
But
Cables.
but then it really becomes a matter of what's the maximum height that this thing, the thing that's being put up there can be at.
Mhm.
And then everything falls in place after that. And if you look at
And how
it,
tall do you want?
within 6 feet, you can get 20-inch slots.
Well, could you say the
And
top
still-
of the
and still
post,
have-
is it 7 feet? The top of the supporting post, is it 7 feet?
I think you can say 6 feet or 7 feet or less. I think you could do whatever you want to do.
Just thinking out loud, okay, so
So
if you
you
start at the
vary-
ground and you put 6 inches space, remember this bar is like this.
No, no, I
So you
have
have
2
6
of them.
inches. Can you get your lawnmower under that or whatever?
Yeah.
And then you have 20-inch spaces and you're basically at the top of the pole then. With 6 inches to the top of the
Mhm.
pole.
Mhm.
Now,
Pardon me, I was just wanted the top of the pole to be at 7 feet, not the. top,
Right.
not the-
Yeah, I know that, yeah.
yeah, all I'm trying to say
That's
is
what we're trying
we
to
can
get
set
there
a
for
max
you.
height, suggest setting a max height for the stuff that gets put on the rack. If the pole's gonna be 7 or 7'2", for whatever is important, fine, but you're not building this whole massive
Right.
stuff up that height. We're
I agree,
holding it. It's
yeah.
gotta be within no more than a 6-foot height of stacked items. And you
And the
size
post
your
could be-
poles.
Post could be taller, right?
If you're building this for paddle boards, it's way different than if you're building it for kayaks. So, you could put probably 8 paddle boards on one of these because they'd be narrower slots, 20-inch slots.
No, you still have to, yeah,
You got
yeah.
that skin.
Well, and I look at it as, rather than have them all over the lawn area, if they're on a rack, if they are secured, hopefully secured enough, they're not gonna blow around, they're not gonna be flooded out and float away. And we've seen that
Yeah,
happen quite a
that
bit too. So that's another reason to have them elevated 18 inches or so, and then have them locked in.
Especially with the big tides we had not long ago.
Yeah.
That was ridiculous, and you're right.
Okay,
That
so-
becomes a landowner's issue though. Let them figure out how high they want it to be, but they can't go above a certain height.
Well,
Right.
help me out. How far apart are the poles? The little rods?
The rods, what did we say, 18
I
inches?
thought it was 18 inches.
I think so.
Okay, he's saying 20, so that's what I was trying to figure. If you do
I'm saying
18,
20 because I estimated what I would do
Okay.
if I was building
I'm
this thing and from what I've seen.
running my little math,
So
sorry.
far, all the boats are sit on top.
So do you know it's 18 or you're just guessing?
18 is what I recall. But
See, we don't really know anything.
Well, and we've been trying to get
Yeah,
a contractor. And as we get them, they're gone because we've been doing this for a year now. And so they have, I'm
she's
sure, a
doing the right
template that they use. Whoever who's built these. So,
I've seen them with various numbers of
Yeah.
poles or pipes, whatever you want to call them, but the thing is, we only need to set a height.
Right,
That's
And
right.
how
So
many
let's set
poles
it.
people put
let's
in.
set it.
Let's
Yeah.
set it for them.
Is everybody okay with setting a
Yes.
height?
Yeah.
And then they decide how many things they want to try to
Yes.
get in.
Right.
Absolutely.
Tony,
exactly.
Or is
7
there an
feet good for
unintended
height.
consequence of doing that?
7 feet.
I don't care how many you put on it if you don't go above the height
Yeah.
of this, of,
let's see how tall.
you're not gonna put a paddle board on the top.
No.
Well, he just said he needs 7 feet for cable and security, and I understand the security.
The height of the pole.
Right, he's
Oh.
talking about the height of the pole, but your boards aren't gonna go
Yeah,
that high.
exactly.
But that's because they're trying to configure so many things within it. And what I'm saying, we have to look more broadly across this whole space and say, what's a reasonable direction to give people? Because they're gonna want to configure their pipes to suit their needs.
Well, you can't get a kayak in, I mean,
You know, the person.
if you configure them very
No,
tightly.
you can't.
So-
Better than you think.
Yeah.
They're 16 inches high.
But I think you're on the right track if you just limit the height of the pole, let the property owner figure out how
Did
many.
it
to
in
put
there.
together.
What they're,
We're, by the way, we wanted to restrict, we've got 7 boat owners, 7 slips. We wanted to make sure we didn't have more slots, or it'd be looking like a used boatyard.
Right.
So by coming up with 2 racks that had 4 each, that way we've got a guest slot, so to speak, okay?
Mhm.
Or maybe one that on top will stay empty.
That raises an interesting point that you're limited in the number of slots. So that's what you get. If you get 2 racks, you get 8 slots. And everybody.
sell your boat.
And if you put a paddleboard in there or you put a kayak, you don't get the size.
Mhm.
That's another way to look at this.
Right.
We're basically adopting a single design.
I think Karen's created a really good template, or at least a model for you to work off of going forward. When, you know, considering changes in regulations or requirements or standards or whatever you want to call
Right.
them. But right now, I think we complied with the UDO. as things. Okay,
and all the setbacks and
and I just need to get on with it.
So do we want to make the height limit 6 feet of the
7.
pole?
Oh, 7.
7 feet, okay.
And I feel like that's too high. But that's
I would go with 6 feet.
the way that it looks.
Want to split the
It's
difference?
awfully high.
6.5.
6 is too high.
What are those? You have any idea how tall those are?
I think those are 6.5 feet.
Yeah.
They're 8 footers that are in the ground.
Did you measure
Probably
any of the sticks? Those?
No, ma'am.
1.5 feet.
That do require you walking on property.
What is the, Tony, you sent us the stuff. It's the fence height's 3 feet.
Fence height is, maximum height is 3 feet and that's what? 3 feet.
Boy, that's not enforced.
I would say the majority.
Yeah. I've
Oh, a
seen it.
lot of them are 4 feet. There's that big old new house that put the metal fence, it's 4 feet, aluminum fence.
Oh, that one down from me.
Oh, yes.
That's
It
what I
should
know.
be 3 feet.
That
You
Tony,
can tell
that-
when they go like this and the droop, you can tell when they hit the
That
3
fence is-
feet.
It's is,
Okay, so 7 feet height limit.
that's. what I said.
Everybody's
I'm
okay with that, except for you want 6 feet and Neil wants 6.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
He's for 6.
But
Six.
I'm actually more headed towards the 34 inch if the aldermen want to maintain a certain, consistency with
34
fencing.
inch.
34 inch what?
3
36
feet,
inch, I'm
oh,
sorry,
3 feet
36.
height.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
For
no
the
point
fence,
in
I
having
have it below the fences.
No, I understand that it certainly changes things and you probably need more footprint to
You have to have a
accommodate certain
bunch of
things,
them.
but
Yeah, you would have to have
But
a
it
bunch of
depends on
them.
what-
It's a,
See, this
What
isn't
they want.
bad.
You would just
Not
leave it
bad.
on the ground
Right.
at 3 feet
mhm.
and then
You wouldn't use a rack.
not if it's a
there are
limit of
examples
3
of it
feet
in there.
height.
Not of that design, but that design can be made to that.
So do we take a vote on,
I think first of all, we come up with some of our standards of
Uh-huh.
recommendation for this. And knowing that we're gonna be coming back to this.
right, and we'll send them on to the
Send
Board
it
of
on to
Health.
the board and
Okay.
see what the board says.
But we still have to say we're sending them
Give
with
them a
7.
number.
Yeah.
So I vote 7.
How about
So do we
7?
take a vote that we're doing this? Is that how we do
Yeah, I vote
it? Y'all
7.
help me. You said.
No, I
okay,
think you
help me,
make,
so-
I think you make a motion.
Let's
is what
make
you
a
do.
And then
motion.
vote
Make
on the
and then
motion.
vote on it.
Vote on
And
Right,
then
but
you
we
just
haven't
yay or
agreed
nay.
on
Okay.
the
it. Okay,
6 or 7.
okay.
Yes.
So it's hard to make a motion if we
Well-
don't agree on the
Okay.
6 or 7. Don't you think we
Well,
need
you
to
have to
agree
make
on
2
that?
motions. Make the first one, if it doesn't pass, then you do the second.
Okay, thank you.
So I can make a motion that the first height limit is, I'll go for 7 because I
Of the
understand.
poles.
Of the poles,
supporting
I
poles.
understand the security side of it.
Yeah,
me
too.
So I get that.
Okay.
So I would like to make a motion, then we can make a second, somebody else can do one for
Motion
6 feet.
height
I make a motion for for the height of 7 feet.
for supporting
For the
poles.
For
post.
supporting posts.
Supporting posts.
Yes. So I'll make a motion for that.
And I second it. All
Call for
those
the
in
vote.
favor?
I'm in favor.
Where it passes forward.
Okay, so it passes 4-2.
So height is
All
7
right, so
feet.
it's 4-2.
But I kind of want a stipulation that it not be any wider than the one side, because I could see somebody coming here and putting a pole, and then you've got this monstrosity of you've got the,
One-sided, you want it one-sided.
Yeah,
We
Well,
can
you
put that down.
actually-
here.
You can actually go ahead and vote on a width as well.
Yeah,
yeah,
Mhm.
because you want you want all your sizes.
yeah,
You got to have. a
So we need the width.
yeah, I
Right.
agree.
So what's your width?
3.5 feet, is that what you said?
3.5 feet, 42 inches.
3.5 feet, 42
And that was
inches.
one-sided.
One side.
One-sided.
So where you got width 6 feet, we're gonna mark that out and say 3.5, one-sided.
And I would like to propose that we make it in the setback. I think it has to be in that 7.5 feet.
I agree with you.
I think it's-
agree. I feel like that's really important.
Yeah.
I do too. It's something
You don't
stuck out
want
in
it
the
in
middle.
the middle, it's gonna be worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Maybe
There's
we
a
should
picture of one that's actually in the middle and it looks terrible.
Maybe we should redefine the setback, because I don't know that you want it right at the very edge, but maybe it's 12 inches in.
I think it needs to be
We're
within
talking
that
about
7.5 feet.
Mhm.
Mhm,
Up to your fence.
mhm.
Yep,
Yeah.
Why would you not want that? Just out of curiosity.
Whose fence is it?
Well,
Is it your
It
neighbor's
just has
fence?
to
I
be in
don't
the 7.5 feet from your property line.
and everybody's fence is on their property line.
know. So they turn it around and then they face it the other way and now it's still in the middle of the yard. Or at the 7.5
How do you
foot.
mean?
They can't go out.
You
They
put
can't
the
go out of the
post-
setback.
No, you put the post at 7.5 feet and fence and set and have them facing the edge, the yard edge.
I'm just saying
That's
that
all I'm
the,
saying.
the width of this cannot extend out of that 7.5 foot setback.
Well, if it's only 3.5 feet.
Yeah,
Not going
Yeah.
to.
there's no way you can turn it this way.
Well, I'm not suggesting it would go outside of the setback. What I'm saying is it can be oriented so that it is at the setback facing towards the fence line.
And I'm
But
saying, you're saying it
I'm
would run parallel to the road, not perpendicular.
No, he's saying that you would be accessing the
rotate that.
kayaks from
From
the
the
fence, which I'm not sure anybody would want to do that. But
But,
But
okay,
we'll figure that out.
Okay.
There'll be a
Yeah.
reason they do it.
well, then make a stipulation that it run perpendicular to
That
Wayne.
the posts sit at a certain point relative to the property line, that's all.
Well, I would agree.
Mhm.
Make it
And they
within,
cannot exceed.
what's
all-
a fair amount to that actual
42
property
inches.
line? 3 feet?
3.5 feet, 42 inches, one-sided, it cannot extend outside the 7.5 foot
But
property line, right? Or
But what
setback.
he's saying is he thinks the post should stay within
6 inches of the.
35,
property
or I
line,
think
is
you're
that what
saying actually less, I mean, a little bit
Not-
more than that.
What you're saying is not on the property line, right?
Well, it forces a few things. It forces it to be tucked into the space. It also forces that if they're gonna have bushes, that they've gotta trim them out.
So you're
that
saying
they
those
can't be
posts
there,
cannot be any further than 3 feet off the property line? Because that gives 7.5 feet, that gives you your 4.5 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
math would work
I
that
think
way.
one thing is
but-
important, and this is all the fences I've ever dealt with. You need to be able to maintain between your property line, be it hedges, be it a fence, so you can have at least one lawnmower
You
Yeah,
got
it's-
that.
sweep.
Right.
You gotta
Because
do that.
otherwise, if you make it difficult, you know, you're gonna end up
doesn't
having.
Well, would
Right.
3.5 feet, that post
Big.
to not be further, or would you rather? If it's 3.5 feet wide, you could technically go to 4 feet. So the 8-foot post wouldn't extend any further than 4 feet from the
Mhm.
property line.
Twin posts,
Would that give you enough to maintain?
that's not.
And that would-
I think 3.5 feet would
So-
work, 4 feet.
Yeah.
But that
The
would
thing is
cover
what-
his, what he's saying, that they couldn't turn the rack this way and extend it.
Yeah.
Or 2 feet from the property line.
Yeah,
What do they-
what you do see
Within
along
the
the
setback.
boulevard there is people stuff behind the rack that
Right.
they built, and that
Or the
just becomes
fence.
this this mucky mess.
Or you could just say it has to be located within the setback, the 7.5 foot.
Well,
setback.
we said that,
Avoid
but
that.
yeah.
So if your 8-foot posts are 6 feet apart, he's saying that rack could technically be set this way and could have, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that they can just,
Right, right.
They could.
Yeah, they could flip it.
Well,
and
but
it
Seven
wouldn't
and a half
hurt.
feet is enough to do it either way.
yeah, so. I
So
think
we're
what
trying
saying
to
is
limit that.
You want accessibility to the property line, fence, bushes, whatever it is, and then build out and then. Nothing's
No
gonna
further
be,
than the setback.
Well, I mean, do you want to say
Go
that
for
it
it.
would be parallel with the property line or perpendicular to Wayne Boulevard?
Yeah, I think
that's
you
what
say
I
that.
kinda
I
said.
think you say that, I think someone said.
That's
I did
Those
say
are-
perpendicular to Wayne.
Yeah.
It's
that
not-
way- that way we're not
And
doing
how
this.
many feet off your line?
Everybody good with 2?
2 feet.
2 feet
Yeah.
off the line.
Yeah.
It's
If
not
you've got a
extend
bigger
beyond
lawnmower than
2
that, you don't have enough
feet
lawn there.
Yeah, that's not.
So.
off
so we
property
might-
line,
That'll keep your bushes cut too.
property line and run
Those 8-foot posts.
perpendicular
I think if we tell them that it has to run perpendicular, the 2
To-
feet off the property line becomes moot.
Waynick.
What was the 8-foot post you just mentioned?
The post 8 inches,
8
not
inch.
feet.
8 inches,
Not-
sorry, not 8 feet,
Yeah,
8
yeah,
inches.
yeah.
But if we give them 3.5 feet, they're not gonna be able to go a whole lot for, as long as we stipulate it's perpendicular, we don't
this-
have to get into all the footage. I
Okay,
don't think.
so height of 7 feet support of the supporting posts,
Maximum.
maximum. Maximum height, width 3.5 feet, 42 inches, one-sided. It cannot extend outside the 7.5 foot setback. Supporting posts must not extend beyond 2 feet off property line and must run perpendicular to Waynick and the bulkhead.
Okay, read that first part of that again,
Um,
just that last one.
supporting posts must not extend beyond 2 feet off the property line and must run perpendicular to Waynick Boulevard.
But unfortunately, that doesn't say that they can't put it closer than 2 feet to the property line.
But I don't,
Just say
I didn't think we
closer
cared
than-
if they went closer to the property line.
that's
I think
fine.
the closer to the property line, the better,
Yeah.
because they're not gonna put anything behind it.
It'd just be their maintaining, I would
They're not
assume.
gonna be able to
So
make,
you're making a good decision as to how close,
So it would be
Yeah.
within that 7.5 foot area and let it be the design of the property, because you don't, I think you don't want to tie your hands depending upon what's out there. And to have those maximums or not to exceed allows some flexibility and you're not tying your hands.
I think we can take the 2 foot out and just say
Yeah.
not to
I
extend
think
beyond the
so.
7.5 foot and say that it has to run perpendicular. The rest of it will fall into place.
And then you're gonna need a length. You're gonna
Yes,
need a length as well, how far apart those 8-foot posts are. Length.
I agree.
So what'd you figure for that?
6 feet, what?
6 feet apart.
6 feet?
but then what's the distance between the two different?
We had another 8 feet between the two racks.
You still had plenty of
Yeah.
space out front.
Yes, yes. We didn't, the ends of the kayak would not cross over the property line on the Waynick side, on the
Yeah,
street
so
side.
what was that setback
6 foot,
that you
8
used?
foot.
I don't,
There we go.
the post is 7.5 feet, well, it's more than that.
8 feet long.
Side, but-
Maybe
No.
8 feet. No,
No,
6
they're
feet, 6 feet, 8 feet, 6 feet.
Correct.
And what's the starting point at the? at
So that's
the
20
Waynick?
feet.
We were.
You're to-
Well, we started from the 30 feet from
Oh,
the
you
Oh,
walked
they
eight
back.
started
feet.
from the, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
because we've got to be out of that
Yeah, that
eight
makes
And then you
feet,
got 8,
the area of environmental
then you got
concern.
8 inches, 8 inches.
But not the overhang of
Then
the.
you
It
got 2
is.
feet.
No, the
Yeah.
overhang's
Yeah.
not gonna be
22
the
feet.
problem, it's
But
it's
what did
what's
that
on
wind
the
up
line.
giving you from the last eastward pole? Yeah, eastward pole to the fence or property line.
To the street.
Yeah,
Um,
whatever you point.
6 foot
Between-
between,
We
and
did,
then 8
what we
foot
wanted to
between
avoid
the
was going
2.
over the little rope fence
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
because.
It's gonna go
with the
like-
length
Yeah,
of, yeah,
And on top
It's
of
not
that,
in
vehicles with
your
extended
engine plus your
rear view
2
mirrors.
feet of
Yeah.
Because they're 8 inches
Master
each,
trucks,
that's
they're
2
gonna
feet.
be whacking the,
So
the
we're
edge of the
22
kayak.
feet long.
I'd say it's probably 6 feet to that little,
I-
or 5 or 6 feet to that little
Because
fence.
that's an important measurement point for the town, just as for you, that camera line.
Right, and so I think a way to address that would be that,
Right.
the, how would you say it? The
Maybe 30.
vessels, the boats
Yeah.
would have to be maintained on the property. Well, you know,
Within.
cannot extend
Yes.
beyond the property
Yeah.
line.
Exactly.
So how long is, how lengthy is your property line? Do you know?
Well, they're gonna
Yeah.
be 2 racks. They're either gonna be
Is you got
12 to
30
14
inches
feet
and then how
long.
much more?
It'll be 20.
30 feet.
Okay, so
Right.
Yeah, we need to keep moving
Well,
forward.
Okay, but let me do the math here real
We're
quick, because this
Okay.
is important.
This is 8:15.
Okay,
This is a
30
good thing.
feet.
This is a-
Because we're at 6 feet, 8 feet, 6 feet.
She's got it.
Okay, yeah, but we're 6 feet.
26 more feet.
So 6 feet, 8 feet, 6 feet.
Yeah.
Okay, that's 20 feet. And then you got 8-inch poles. So you got 3 of them, that's 24, you got 2 more feet.
Yeah.
That's 22 feet. 30 feet, you gotta be set back, and it's a 50-foot lot. You don't have,
56
a
feet.
pardon?
50, it's 56 feet.
56
on
foot,
the
okay.
It's on the site plan.
Okay.
Right, but the posts are not on the, they're in the middle
Yeah,
of the
they-
rack. They're not
they-
adding
Yeah,
to
they're
the
not on the
length.
ends.
They're in the middle of the rack, so you can't,
He's saying there's 6 foot between each post,
Yeah,
8
yeah.
foot between each post. You gotta take that measurement of that 8-inch post.
Well, it's, you know, so that would
Well,
be
that's-
sitting
That's
4
2 more
inches and
feet.
4 inches.
I'm confused.
No, you know.
It's the center of the post is the point of the measurement.
Yes,
Neil,
the center of the
correct,
post.
we're
Right.
center- the
Center of the
center
post,
line.
yeah.
No, it's
Okay,
50.
so-
But you're not adding the width of the post to the
You
length,
don't need to.
because you should,
That side.
that's added to the width,
That's-
but not the length.
Right.
The overall
It's
length.
within that overall.
Now, this map, it says the lot length is 49.02 on the side with
On the
where you
hedge
plan on
side.
putting it.
Right, okay. Yeah, the other
The other
side
side
was
is 56,
56.
so that you don't
Yeah,
have a
so it would,
49.
we would just fit it in within that 19 feet. Because we have to be out of the AEC. So they might be.
It'll be right up.
We
down the
do
road.
need to have a limitation
So
on what,
you just make your,
Or they put one
8
on the other
feet
side of the
smaller.
other property.
just make
One
your
there,
8
one
feet
there.
smaller.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean.
that's true.
I mean, you could always do one on one side, one on the other, it's no,
We're doing just one.
I mean-
But instead of having them 8 feet apart, they could have them 6 feet
Outside.
apart.
Okay.
Post
Right.
1 to the outside of post 4 would be 20 feet 8 inches. We were going center to center, so we had 6 feet center, you had 4 inches on the.
4
outside.
inches on the outer edge, the outer. 4
Okay,
inches
okay,
of
so
each
it's
post.
just those outer posts. Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
so it would be, the total length of the, from outside of
The
post
structural
1
part.
to the outside of post 4 would be 20 feet 20 feet 8 inches.
Yeah.
And which gave us just enough room to get, make sure we didn't have kayaks hanging over on the
So
street.
you're talking about the
post-
length.
Your
Yeah, because
post
he's
is,
49 feet according to the map,
your
and there's no
western
way you get
post
30 feet.
is at
That only
30
makes
foot.
19 feet.
Yeah,
Right,
it's not gonna.
Right,
it's not
Uh,
gonna
so-
accommodate.
actually,
Probably one.
yeah, I think that.
I think that's how it was
Because
described.
The
earlier.
boat hangs over, but
So,
that doesn't count.
yeah, the boat hangs over into the camera space, but the post stops at the.
Right,
contact.
right.
So what we just created was 2 racks and a wall of things on the racks versus a rack here and a rack there. And now you have greater space that's unadulterated. So a way to look at this is it might be in the best interest of the town to say, you can have 2 racks, but they're both going to be on each side of your property and they're going to be, towards the street, and that gives you more open space.
Now you're saying 2 racks.
I thought we were always saying
We're
two
only
racks.
saying 1 rack.
No, they want 2.
We,
On
They were
one
some-
side of the, all down the hedge.
One side of the
Right.
property.
and and all I said
Back to
was
back.
take one and put it over on the other property line, and that lets you have more water directed space still open versus
I think we limit it to one side.
I do
like the
too.
one side.
Let's do one side.
And look, if they're limited by what KEMA tells them they're gonna do, they're gonna be limited by what KEMA has. You know, I think we tell them they can only do no more than 20 feet.
Yeah, and we're talking about the south side. That's
So
what
you-
you're talking about,
you
the
know,
south
such a
side
whole
of
other
that
side.
property.
But you know, you're not half and half. You got one whole side.
The two
empty.
racks
And if you're,
must
Which
be
runs up to 30.
limited to
Yeah.
one.
Actually, it runs beyond the 30-foot point as far as
One.
stuff,
yes,
because it's hanging over.
Okay, the main thing we're trying to do, Tony, is get them in front of that board.
okay, so we're talking about the
Side,
line,
but
the lot line on the
one
south
edge of the
end.
property.
Have we done
Yeah,
enough to
one
get
side
them here, you think?
Construction.
One side of the property, it is, so it's gonna be on the
One
side.
side
Thank you.
We're
slash
not quite there,
edge
but
of the
wait for the
property line.
motion.
Property line.
And so this will only be for this property, it won't be our recommendation.
But it won't be the final thing. no.
This is
No.
just to get.
They've
them-
been
But what is
waiting
it gonna
here.
be, Tony? Is it gonna be a conditional,
No,
A
we'll be
special
conditional
use?
What we'll probably do, either come up with policy or come up with a text amendment, saying S1, these are the things that are allowed.
okay,
One
Yeah,
rack,
that's
This is
good.
headed towards.
7 foot tall, one side only, 30 foot, and that's probably what we'll do after a few meetings, yeah.
Mhm.
So
And
we'll
we
get
may not
there.
have to say one side only, that'd be the,
Well, I'm talking
I
about
think
one
we
side
make
of the
the reg-
property.
I
Yeah,
think we
yes.
recommend that they're not gonna,
like,
look, we're,
just down
all
one
these
side
are,
instead of 2 and 2, okay.
I
I
think
like
that,
that.
I think that has less vista.
I think we need to say
Intrusion.
something about these posts being secured in the ground, because I think when floods come, hurricanes come,
Didn't you say
those
bury
things
it
can
2
get
feet?
us.
They're
Get-
They're gonna bury it.
Yeah.
2
I
feet.
know, but do we need to say that?
Probably.
You know,
Yes.
Okay.
I would say that,
Yeah,
I haven't even talked to the contractor yet, and they're gonna do it how,
these supporting
That'd be good
posts.
to link to the board.
you know, I think that
Posts.
contractor's gonna know. how
That's
deep
how
it should be.
deep.
Isn't there a calculation of how many feet up top have to go
Well, I
below?
think, like I said, I think the contractor will know, but for a kayak rack, there's probably no standards that says it has to be 2 feet. 3
Yeah,
feet,
so
4
we
feet.
don't need to
So I don't
recommend
think we
that.
need to get into that.
Yeah,
Okay.
it
We just
must
say
be
it has to
sunk,
secure,
sunk and secured
and
into the
that'll be
ground.
different opinions.
According to the
Sunk.
contractor.
And that thing will, of course, they're gonna build it as secure as possible.
Secured in the ground. Okay. Okay, so I think we're,
All right, hold on, now he's got the one per unit, so help me out with. Are we gonna allow 2 racks? I mean, I think at this point, it appears all you can really have is 2,
Right.
because there aren't gonna be
There's
any
not
lots
room.
deeper. So we're almost restricting that in and of
Right.
itself, because we're making them have it on one side. They can only have it to that AEC line, so immediately we limit the number of racks that somebody can put on the piece of
That's
property.
right.
How many square, sorry.
okay,
And I would say that there's some racks out there in some lots that it's 30 feet deep. They can't get anything in that AEC.
And we may have to address some of those a little bit differently, though.
Mhm.
The smaller lots, maybe we do something different, I don't know. But you may have, that lot may be a single family, who knows? And-
How many square feet is left?
so we are limiting,
2,500.
right?
Okay,
Limiting
so
Um,
you're in that.
2 racks.
or
that
limiting,
third level.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
limiting,
you are sort of
I
think if we limit it to
self-limiting by, what you said about back to back.
And the length.
Out of the AEC.
Yeah, I
that's a
think it
criteria.
automatically limits itself.
Okay.
You could send a message that, given the different size of lots, that, the 2 seems appropriate to something with a 25 or 2,000 to 3,000 square foot. But if we preclude people from putting 1 here and 1 there,
well, I think I have that written down,
Or in the
that,
middle.
yeah, that,
what?
Yeah, or in the middle.
That there can only be on one
that
side.
racks must be limited to one side / edge of the property
And the
line.
setbacks. And the setbacks.
Well, I said that
Yeah,
earlier,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
Do you want me to read this?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course.
Listen up now, y'all listen up.
Or shorthand.
So do we need to say 2 racks?
Yeah.
Or,
I think you said
Yeah.
2 racks. we said
yeah,
2 racks.
okay. Okay, so motion, maximum height of the supporting post are 7 feet. The supporting post must be sunk and secured in the ground. The maximum width is 3.5 feet, 42 inches, one-sided and it cannot extend outside the 7.5-foot setback. Supporting posts must not extend beyond the 7.5-foot property line and must run perpendicular to Waynick. The 2 racks must be limited to one side/edge of the property line.
Now, Tony told us not to do the burying thing, right?
The what now?
Burying.
Well, he said
Just
like
secure.
2 feet.
Oh, not to put a,
Yeah.
not to put an amount. Okay, not to put a
Yeah,
number.
leaves it
Gotcha.
according to the
As long as
contract.
it's secured.
Because you can't, like, you could say secured by pouring concrete and putting them in
can't do
concrete. I
that.
think you would rather sink them, wouldn't you?
Yes.
I didn't think you could pour concrete.
Well, you can't, but
Well, this is, we're trying to get them
you're right, through.
there with this. I think this is good. And
Okay,
then we, each time we meet, we do what we have to do that week, and then we
Mhm.
add, before we leave, we do some more of this.
Right.
each
Yes.
time.
okay.
Who made the motion to?
But
Hold
I'm
on.
trying to understand what you just said, Kitty, because what are we tying this to? The size of their lot, or it just doesn't matter? It's just
Tying what to?
what we just specified, or what was just written down?
This example,
This
this
example.
example.
Well, I think it's gonna, the size of
This
the,
this is related to their lot, that what she asked.
no, but this, the size of what we determine is gonna determine what you can get on your side yard. Does that, I mean,
Yeah, it's determined by the length
It's
of the
self-limiting.
yard.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
length is
Yeah.
49 feet.
Yeah.
And
And we
the
may have
length
to
of
do
somebody's
some
yard is 35.
exceptions to the rules.
right,
He's saying that
I
somebody
mean,
might not have 30 feet, so they're
Okay, we see what
immediately
you got.
nothing but AEC, so we'll
Yeah,
have to
it's a
look
little-
into that.
Yeah, we'll have to look at
That's
exceptions
maximum.
to the rules.
maximum.
Maybe they
And,
not
and I
have
would
it.
say, what I want you all to feel is comfortable that this might be a one-off, but if you're okay with it, and then you get to really get into the weeds with how you want to proceed, you could live with what we're proposing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Are
I,
we saying that the footprint is essentially the entire 7.5-foot setback and whatever linear length, 20 some odd?
No, I think we're saying 3.5, it's 3.5 feet.
Mhm.
But did we say anything about a footprint? We didn't,
well,
Well, it can only be 3.5 feet
Yeah, we
wide.
said
Yeah.
3.5 feet wide.
mhm.
but we gave the latitude as to where it can stop and start, so.
And
No,
they
it
put
can't,
length.
it has to be so far back from the
We're gonna say
bulkhead.
the rack can be, the post can be 7 foot tall. The width of that, one sided is 3.5 feet. Whatever, 3.5 feet, and that's it. So that's
It
the
can't
square footage.
stick out
You
of that
can't do both
setback.
sides.
And the length
So-
of the.
But the
it was
only thing is
8
that
feet.
we didn't say where the pole has to start. I understood we had that discussion. But what that essentially says is that
Racks.
you could come up to the 3.5 feet back from the setback and then have that space behind it.
Yeah, you could have 4 feet behind it, you could.
Yeah. And that essentially becomes a larger footprint of stuff. I'm just wondering if, it's an unintended consequence. Someone following those rules could
Limited.
get that 4 foot back there.
And so what's wrong with that?
You
It's-
want to have space back there to
Yeah,
get
what's
to
wrong
your
with the 4
trim
feet? Yeah.
hedges and to
Well,
mow.
that's what we talked about earlier, but 4 feet becomes a jump pile. We've already seen it out there.
Yeah,
It's not just to mow grass. Because it's not a place where people can do anything, it's a place where stuff can get.
then you want to say it's 5 feet from
And,
the lot line,
or you set a starting point and,
but then see,
but
I'm just thinking if there's some of these people that already have like hedges and they maybe don't want it. I feel like as long as we keep it behind that 7.5 foot setback, we've kind of made it simple. We can complicate it and say we want it so far from the property line if that's what you feel, but
and maybe each of these are gonna have to come to the planning board anyway.
Well, I just think if people are gonna throw crap out in their yard, they're gonna do it anyway.
That's what I said.
but
I mean, you see it all up and down. Are
They
you
might
gonna
be
go
given
tell
it,
people
they
they have
can't
to
get it
pick up
given,
a?
throw it on the other
Yeah.
side.
Susan, why
I
do you
mean,
say
I'm-
it's gonna come back to the planning board?
I said, maybe these need to come back to the planning board when they want approval
Motion,
okay.
just motion maximum.
You mean
But
other
this is
people,
headed-
not
this is
just
headed-
poor
7
people.
feet.
No,
well,
this is headed
well,
towards a text amendment.
Yeah.
Maximum
that
height
will
of the
come back
supporting
to us.
post
It'll
is
be-
7 feet.
Well,
and
it's
they
gonna
must
take
be
several
sunk.
more meetings. I mean, this
Yeah.
is gonna take, if
Yeah.
we move this on, we're gonna look at
And then there will
this
be a
several more
text
times.
amendment.
Hopefully
Right.
we'll get everything together and then we'll come back to text, but it won't, each one won't come back again, I don't think, so.
All right, now are you gonna stand up and pave the way for these people?
7 feet.
Well, they've already been up there one time. We'll see where it goes.
Oh,
We'll
I
say
don't
this is a
know. I think I was
recommendation and we'll
Listening
see
to
where it
somebody
goes.
Okay.
saying we need to have.
You know,
4 feet or 2
ideally, you
feet
would
back
want your
behind or
text
whatever.
amendment to be such that they come
Yeah.
into Tony's office, they fill out a
Okay.
permit, and it's all there. Just like if you're gonna be building a house. You know, it has parameters, but it has to be within whatever the standards are for that structure.
And as
Like an
we work on,
accessory
and as we
use.
work on it, Neil, you,
Okay,
we do that.
I'm gonna close the public portion
Okay.
of the meeting, so we can like do this motion. I'm just trying
Thank
to,
you for your time.
yeah,
Yes, thank you
absolutely.
so much.
Do you,
So-
Neil, do you want it in the recommendation that it be within a certain amount of feet inside? I mean, if that's something you feel, we put it in there, if that's,
No, I'm trying to absorb what Tony's saying, there's gonna be these iterations. And something's gotta get keyed off lot size, so it becomes like it's a percentage, so if you have twice the size of the lot, you can do more than if you don't, or we just say, that's it.
That's it. We'll have to work on that. We
Some
gotta
people,
work on that.
everybody can have at least 2, unless you can't fit, then you can't have, you can have 1.
That's right.
Right.
That's the way it is.
Well, that's the way it is.
That's the way your property is.
Well,
You
that's what
bought
I'm
it,
trying
and
to
that's
move
it.
through.
Yeah.
What is the knock-on effect of what we do here versus the variety of spaces?
Right.
Now, the
And
largest
I think,
ones are,
I think that's a discussion for another day, though.
Absolutely.
And I think this is what we're trying to get pushed through, and I can assure you, the Board of Aldermen is gonna rip this to shreds like we have, and,
yes.
and they'll send it back if they don't like it.
I guess
We just want.
I'll just leave with these couple of points, because I don't want to belabor the evening here, but I think they deserve.
I haven't had dinner, my mother.
I think the
Me
board
too. I gotta
deserves
eat.
the
When you
specific,
subtract the large lots out of like with the blockade runner and the yacht club and everything, if you take all 87 S1 parcels that are on that side of Wayne, the average size is, all 87, the average is 2,162 square
Thank
feet.
you. Okay, so
Yeah,
they're
so I
gonna
mean,
be
that's
pretty much
something to
like that.
consider in your calculation.
yeah, and
Thank you
there's
so
there's
much.
only
That's
5
so
that
helpful.
fall, under 1,000, so.
Mhm.
Self-regulate.
Okay.
I think the idea of the footprint is just something that I'm having trouble wanting to abandon. So maybe it's just a footnote to the Alderman that, this approximates a certain amount of footprint.
Okay,
It's
we
a
can put that
more
as
fluid
a note to the Board of
situation.
Aldermen.
That's all.
I can mark that if you want.
And I think we kind of did that with the length and the width.
8 times, so
And the
8
height.
times 3 and 8 times 3.5.
So what do you want, a
is,
note?
26, 27 square feet.
Is what you
So
approximate.
let's say it has to be within 30 square feet.
But to the point that it's actually maybe a little bit fluid. So, I mean, if we put a hard number there, we put a hard number there. I'm not sure what the consequence of putting that hard number is when we're kind of guessing, not guessing, but estimating things, that's all. Just trying to give them some guidance that the footprint may be a bit variable, given some specific.
So what would you like for me to note to the Board of Aldermen? To take into consideration?
Well, we
Foot,
The
Could
thing,
not-
well, it's just this one time, Neil. What we're saying to them, I mean, we're not coming with the whole plan. We're just trying to get them
Back to the board.
back to the board. So, but when we go back to them with everything, so what you're saying is you want it done right now, the foot plan, and I just don't think we're ready for that.
It's like 72 square feet. If I take what'd you say, 20 feet, 8 inches?
20 feet, 8 inches, yes, ma'am.
So I'm gonna say 20.8 times 3.5 is 72.8. I just did 20.8 for ease of 8 inches isn't quite 0.8
of the structure.
of the structure.
the visual footprint, looking outward at it, is whatever the kayaks and paddleboards tend to be.
Yeah, but the structure
And
itself.
that can be a significant adding factor, that's all. And that's all what I'm
Right,
trying to
right.
say is that, you know, it's not an exact footprint. It depends on what gets put on the rack.
Yeah.
And how fat it is and
I
how
can't
long
help
it
her
is.
write that, Neil.
But I don't think we can control, like,
What people
you can
on
put
the
a
rack.
6-foot
Well,
paddleboard on there, but not an 8-foot.
well, no,
I
I'm
mean,
not suggesting, I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying we're turning over a rock here. What's this gonna look like? And I mean, at the end of the day, that's part of the question. What is this thing gonna be looking like? Right now, what you have on paper, it's gonna be one length down the side.
It's not gonna be a
Structure.
solid structure. It's not gonna be 7 feet tall, 3.5 feet
Like
wide.
half the bushes out there.
Yeah, it's not gonna be a solid structure. We know that. But I think once we've given it the width and the height and the length, how can we get any more specific?
Do you want me to make a note to the Board of Aldermen to take into consideration the footprint of,
They will.
well, I know they will,
Yeah.
but.
Yeah, but
I'm
he's not really talking about footprint. He's talking about what could go on those racks and
I'm not trying to.
Distortion.
conflate
No, no.
Two issues. I'm saying the footprint is this, the visual aspect of that footprint is bigger and higher. That's all. Because it does come to the fact that, do you really want 2 racks in a row, or do you want them separated?
We've already
You're gonna allow
decided that.
2. You
I don't
didn't
think Neil
decide that.
agrees.
We didn't do a vote.
Well,
You
I-
didn't
that's,
vote.
We're trying
that's,
to get to it.
I understand what
That's
you're putting down
written
on paper. We didn't do a vote yet. And I
okay, well, you.
specifically may be a person that votes against it because of that issue. And I'm saying that I would like, the reason I might not vote for it is to simply have some reflection in a footnote.
is there a way to,
Yeah, well, what we'll do is, whatever you decide, I'll bring up that some members of the planning board is talking about the footprint. He brings up, talking about, it's not just this, it could be, the footprint may be. a
well,
body
he's
of-
saying he would be more in favor of,
Understood, though.
yeah, but he's saying he'd be more in favor of 2 separate racks rather than 1 long rack.
Well, what we'll do is.
But the rest of us don't.
Well, y'all
He's
have
wanting
voted-
that point to be known.
Yeah, y'all haven't voted on it yet, so when you vote,
Well,
we'll say what the vote was, and then we may reflect, we're talking about one side only. Some members may have wanted the other side, with one on one side, one on the other.
Okay.
We're voting on the menu at a Greek diner here. That's part of the problem.
Well, but is that not what you're saying? You almost think it might be a little bit more aesthetic to have 2 racks, 1 on each side than 1 long.
I think at the end of the day, this is all about aesthetics, to
It
be
is.
honest with you.
And maybe even lower,
Yeah.
not as high.
Yeah, so.
How did you decide on the one long?
Basically to keep it most of the property open. So
Yeah, I
we
think
can
you,
have
and see, I kind
I
of agree.
agree.
I don't like it broken up. I think you,
Well,
Then it's even more.
And I think we have it, do you mind if we talk?
Well,
We have a unique piece of
Kitty asked
property.
you. a
Our
question, so-
access to the dock is straight down the middle. Not many are like that, and you'll notice that as you go down, they'll come off with their 6 foot, and then it comes way over, and then because it's those docks that have their riparian
Yes.
buffers that actually regulate where they go out, so your land
Walkway's
is one
different.
thing, but where that dock is the other. And that kind of sets the
So
stage
if we
from,
told you that you had to put 1 on each side, that would be part.
I don't think you can
Yeah.
do one, I don't think you can regulate every single lot. And I think you don't want to tie your hands with, you gotta do it this way, but just have these broad standards that, like you're doing, they're gonna be self-regulated if you have to be out of the AEC and then you've only got
Right.
X amount of feet left.
That's right.
Right, yeah.
So that's, I think, a key message to the board is that there is this aspect of variability that it's hard to just say, just do this, and then,
Yes.
you've created havoc. But,
And maybe you could say also that we are concerned with the distance.
Yeah.
If you all are.
Yes.
Well, it
And
should,
that's sort of why I want it on one side, because that's less,
That is important to us.
yeah,
I agree.
All right,
well,
what
Figure
do we
that
have
out
to
and-
do?
Well, I
right,
think Leanne was making a motion, so,
add something in there about Vista and make the motion. Please.
All right. So this, I'm gonna make a motion. Okay, ready?
Does
The
she have
motion
to
is
read
to
that
sub-
whole thing over again?
No, I got it right here,
Okay.
yeah.
I think. The supporting post must be some, but no, the maximum height is 7 feet of the supporting post. The supporting post must be sunk in, is that several,
Secure.
securely in
Sunk
the
in
ground. I'm
securely.
trying to read her handwriting. The width, 3.5 feet, 42 inches, one-sided. It cannot extend outside the 7.5 foot setback, 7.5 foot setback.
Yeah.
Now, you marked this out with
Mhm,
the
mhm.
perpendicular.
It's because we.
Supporting posts must not extend beyond the 7.5 foot property line and must be run perpendicular to Wainick. Racks must be limited to one side edge of on the edge of the property line. And then we are not making a note to the Board of Aldermen.
I think you could put something in there that, that we are concerned about the Vista and we've tried to.
Well, you could say this, you could say, I don't know if we're doing this right, but you could say that, yeah, the 2 racks must be limited to one side / edge of the property line to ensure
There you go.
To ensure, yeah,
the best visible
Vista.
vista. Does that sound okay?
Perfect.
yeah.
Yes.
Vista.
it just doesn't make sense to me.
I would call it side yard, because that is specific.
I think I said side / edge of the property line.
Side yard.
I don't understand how if you elongate something towards the water, you're enhancing, you're actually taking more
Well,
vista. That's
right.
why I'm confused as to using those words in that.
It depends
situation.
on your point of view of the Vista. Is your Vista looking at it straight on? Or is your Vista looking at it this way?
From an angle or like my Vista,
A vista is like,
mine is at an angle.
But if you're standing at the side of the property line, it doesn't take away any Vista that it's longer. It all depends upon your relative point of view. I mean, I agree with what you, but I'd much rather have it on one side than two,
Yeah.
but
But that, I still think this is something we can debate later.
Yeah,
How to
I agree.
fix And perfect
Yeah.
after Neil.
but Neil's wanting to make
Neil-
sure they understand his concern, and I get that.
I do too. But he's, when he browbeats us next time, and we may change our minds. See?
I don't feel I'm browbeating, I'm just trying to get clarity, so.
I second the motion.
I third it. Let's vote. Yes, everybody vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Neil,
Neil's a no.
okay,
And that makes a statement to them as well.
Yes.
that's
Do you
5
want her
to
to put a
1.
little note on there? Neil, you want her to put a note?
Because they already voted, so they didn't want one.
Say that.
I'm not being pouty about that.
Yes, you are.
Tony can.
In my discussion, I can just bring up different
He said,
ideas,
hey, that's what he
and
said.
the board may not,
And just tell them we.
may
that
bring
we-
it back to us.
Yeah, just tell them we're throwing things
They-
around right now.
They didn't acknowledge that it was overly complex, but it is rather complex.
It is.
Yes, it's very complex.
So we're gonna be doing all this as one for a while.
For a couple meetings, several meetings.
Thank you
Thank
guys for
you.
putting up with it.
Yes.
And, I agree with you, your overall S1 probably is.
Okay.
conservative in this.
Okay, so next on the agenda is
Okay.
any old business? Any old business?
No.
I don't have any other business?
I do, I have something I'd like to say before we adjourn.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'll make this quick. I believe that and I was gonna say this earlier, but I think that, and I've talked with other I think we have a very good planning board put together now. And I think it's, and I think if we work as a team, and team being the key word, we all are transparent with what we've learned and what we've done, and we've talked to, I think that we can do really, really, really good things for Wrightsville Beach and the residents here.
I wish Sam had been here tonight.
I wish Sam had
We did
been
a
here
lot
tonight too.
yeah.
So that's what I wanted to say.
Okay. Any other business from the staff?
We just got another text amendment yesterday,
No.
and I will send that to everybody early.
Thank
But
you.
again, remember, they can change, so
Mhm.
this is a text amendment for retaining walls. So I'll try to remember to send that out tomorrow.
Okay.
So we'll hear that at the next meeting, the March meeting. Is this April meeting? So it's a text amendment for that, so that's the only thing we have so far.
Okay. And is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All in
Aye.
favor? Aye. Robert, thank you again
Oh, no problem.
for all your hard work.
That's what I'm here for.
Absolutely.
No, just keep that in your binder.
Tuck it in
I
the,
take on mine.
like the little thing right here.
You're gonna take this off.
Mhm, Yes, I'll pick that up.
We've done a great job. And
We didn't
I think
have
we're
it
gonna-
like the
I think we're
last
gonna
one.
be a
We all had
very good,
some.
Neil, I think we do a great job.
board member.
Well, to the point you raised, working as a team, I absolutely agree with. That's what I've looked
Yeah,
at
we all need to
doing.
work as a team, and I think
But-
that, my point is, I think Sam does.
Good night.
Good
morning. Excuse me, good morning.
Well, and this is his fifth meeting, and it's a big one. I'm glad you- because he's been up. This is-
So I can get reported about
If
that.
it was any of us,
But I would like to revisit some of the discussion points I put out. in my mail.
Did a pretty good job coming
And
there.
do that
I
as
know.
a business, not to monopolize.
Different.